I've told bits and pieces of the story to people before, but I don't think I've ever shared the whole story in one piece. I also have to apologize for some of the details being a bit blurry to me. This is for two reasons. A. People may have lied to me about some of the circumstances, and B. Drugs were involved. For the record, I'm male, and at the time of the story I was 15 or 16. So when I was a lot younger, maybe 13, I got mixed up with a few of the wrong people, and we started experimenting with all kinds of drugs and doing all kinds of illegal things. This all culminated in one summer in junior high when I realized I was going down the wrong path, and so I got away from these people. Fast forward to my freshman year of high school, I got a random message on MySpace from one of the people I used to hang out with. This girl may have been the most screwed up out of all of them. I actually had a long history with her. We went all the way back to kindergarten. She liked to come up with names for herself that she thought made her sound edgy. At this time she was going by Death Cake. Anyways, Death Cake told me that she wanted to catch up and that she had gotten herself together. Apparently, she just got out of rehab and was having a welcome home party. Being silly and young, I thought she really might have gotten it together, so I figured why not. It turned out that this party was really just me, her, and two other people. One of the other two people was a guy I'd never met before. He told me his real name, but also told me that he would like me to call him Snow. Alright, sure, I'll go with that. These people just like nicknames. Snow says he's 18 and spends most of the night making passes at me. I'm polite but clearly not interested. Everything in general is getting weird here, and I'm starting to get a little uncomfortable. I started getting my stuff together to leave when they begged me to stay a little bit longer. I figured fine. I guess the least I could do is celebrate her soberness with her. Then after that, I never have to hang out with them again. Now throughout the course of the night, I saw Snow pull Death Cake aside to talk to her privately. In the beginning, he wasn't really suspect, but a few times I noticed whenever he pulled her aside, sometimes he would look directly at me while he spoke with her. Death Cake brings out what she called herbal tea. Damn, I don't know how I could have been so young and stupid to drink that tea. That was the last thing I remember that night. The next day I wake up in my living room. I figured he must have had some drinks or something like old times. Got carried away. They dropped me off and I let myself in for another night of getting away with some illegal fun. The day after that, I started getting messages on AIM from somebody I never remembered talking to. He was very nice and kept referring to himself as my secret admirer. Mind you, at this point, I still really didn't remember anything from that night. So this dude keeps messaging me saying really nice things. I was actually kind of flattered. 3 or 4 days after that night at Death Cake's house, he tells me he has a present for me. He tells me to check my mail. 5 minutes later, I check. There in my inbox are 3 pictures of a naked dude. I realize I've seen his face before. I also realize I've seen his penis. It's Snow. Suddenly details of the night at Death Cake's house start coming back to me. Then I freak out and realize exactly what must have happened. Now, before anybody judges me for not going to the authorities immediately, let me just say that I knew if I told anyone that all of the details of my past illegal doings would have also come up to the surface, and I wasn't about to let that happen. Instead, I figured that I would just never have to see this guy in any context again, so I kindly just told him to screw off and leave me alone. And just when you thought this was going to be a simple story, it gets much crazier. Snow. This dude left me alone for another few days, then I got a text message from a number I'd never seen. I love you, it said. Now who the heck would send me that? I figured just leave it alone and don't reply. I love you, I love you, I love you, we have something special. All I can think at this point is no. Still, I'm hoping he will eventually wear himself out and forget about me. Now I have blocked his instant message account, so I got a shock when a new one starts messaging me. Except instead of words, it's numbers and pictures. 30, then a picture of a rope. 34, another rope. I'm sure you can imagine the bricks I shat when I realized he was quoting my pant size. Then all of a sudden something cracked in my head and I went full on berserk via instant message. I told him to leave me alone and that we would never be together, especially considering what he did. He told me if I wasn't going to cooperate, he would just have to lock me away so I could be his forever. This is when I finally threatened him with calling the police. I gave him a whole bunch of stuff about how I have a family in law enforcement. Not really true, but whatever, and if he ever tried to lay another finger on me, I would stop at nothing to see him rot away in prison for the rest of his life. Turns out this was surprisingly effective. I expected him to become more threatening, but instead he seemed more sad. Like genuinely sad. But obviously I wasn't going to try to help him. He started saying all this crazy stuff, which I just ignored until he stopped. Once he did, he never contacted me again. I heard 3 days later from one of the people who was there that night that he ended up dead. A few months later, the same person told me that he almost died. This same source also told me that once he got out, he was coming for me. This is the part that I had mentioned earlier, where I said I wasn't sure what to believe. This person who told me all of this was completely unreliable and a drug addict and had a history of terrorizing people in our high school, so who honestly knows what actually happened to Snow? I certainly don't. I haven't heard from him or about him from anyone since. These days, I'm a lot less terrified. I'm almost 22 now, and for the most part, my mental scars have been replaced with my ability to smell a creep a mile away, which has helped me help friends out of similar situations. So, there's that. Out of respect for everybody's privacy, names in this story will be changed. The important people to know are me and my cousin, whom I'll call Drew. Some of the prominent neighborhood kids will call Josh, Kylie, and Evan, and of course Gabe. To set the story, this was around the time my mom and dad divorced. It wasn't a clean divorce, and there was a lot going on around this time. My mom had to move out of the school district and into a small home quickly, and my dad kept the house in our neighborhood. I bring this up to explain that although my two brothers decided to stay with my dad, I and my cousin, who lived with us most of his life, decided to move in with my mom. The issue was that my mom's new place wasn't within the school district, which meant no buses. So the setup was that she'd bring us to school before work, and after school we would catch the bus to my dad's house and stay there for a couple of hours until she got off work. Now that everything is explained, let's get into what you're really here for. There were quite a few kids in our neighborhood, and I guess you could say we all got along and hung out quite a bit. We would all ride the bus together, hang out after school, and heck, even try to build forts in the moss. The moss was a spot in the woods where you could access through a small opening at the end of a cul-de-sac. This is important for later. It was an everyday thing for us, until one day a new family had moved into the neighborhood, and with them was their son Gabe. He had brown hair and he was skinny. We first met Gabe on the school bus, and us being curious about a new kid in our neighborhood, we were all eager to talk to him. You'd probably think we got some vibe off of him, or maybe something about him was creepy, but honestly, he just seemed like a regular kid to me. He seemed to fit in with the other kids in the neighborhood. It became normal to see me, Josh, Kylie, Drew, Evan, and Gabe hanging out, rather than all of us or a combination of the few. After getting to know him, we learned that Gabe actually used to go to our school but got expelled after he threw stuff at a teacher, and only just that school year let him back into our school. Back then, we brushed it off as something edgy he did, but knowing the events now, it should have been the first red flag. You see, Gabe, Drew, and I became close. I'd argue closer than the other kids. I would have considered him a friend instead of just another neighborhood kid to hang out with, which is why we didn't immediately drop him off after the following events. I wasn't there for this, but I heard about it after the fact. Drew and I got on the bus one day, and immediately I noticed Gabe wasn't there. We sat next to each other every day on the bus. I just assumed that he was absent, and Drew decided to sit by me. Kylie and Evan, who sat near us, started talking about something that happened, and we joined into their conversation. Apparently, not long after Drew and I left to go into my mom's, Gabe had invited Kylie, Evan, and Josh to his house. Now, I don't remember what set this in motion or what really happened, but the hangout ended with Gabe chasing Josh home with a knife in his hands. Josh lived on the other side of the neighborhood, and once he got home, his mom came out to see what was going on, as she heard him yelling for her from the front yard. When she stepped out, Gabe chased both of them inside. The scariest part, they heard from Josh that he was laughing and had a smile on his face as he did so, like he enjoyed terrorizing them. The cops were called, and honestly, I don't know what came out of that other than Gabe was gone from school for a few days after. When he came back, he acted like it never happened. The kids in our neighborhood started growing apart from Gabe after that, especially John, whom I never actually saw talk to him again. I mean, who would blame him? I guess I felt bad for Gabe a little bit, but my stupid brain must have decided it was a bad prank that went too far or something like that. How dumb was I? I truly believe Gabe changed after that, like something had clicked in his brain. Not long after this, we were on the bus and I was talking to him as we sat in the same seats. All of a sudden, he just pulled out a pencil and tried to stab me with it. Not only did he try, but he also did stab me, right in the neck. Luckily, it only broke the skin, but it shocked me. He laughed like he was joking, and I decided to move seats. When I got off, I felt the need to explain what happened to the bus driver. I never should have done that. I believe to this day that one choice caused what happened next. He was kicked off the bus for a couple of days. When he returned, they made him sit at the front of the bus. He knew it was me who snitched on him. When I'd walk past him to get off the bus, he would glare at me and it felt evil. He called me names and a snitch, and I was honestly scared of him. Fast forward a week later, and all the kids in our neighborhood just decided that they wouldn't hang out with Gabe anymore, and I wish I could say the same. Even after everything I had just spilt to you all, I was naive and dumb. Eventually, he messaged me apologizing and messaged me to ask if Drew and I wanted to hang out. I don't know why, but we agreed. I think I remember him saying that he and some other kids were going to hang out in the moss and build some forts, and I think that's why we agreed, because other kids would be there. So we set off to meet him at his house, which was just down the street from ours. We knocked on his door and he answered it, holding a knife. Screw the red flag. I was ignoring a whole red alarm at this point. It was a kitchen knife with some sort of orange handle. With a huge smile on his face, he held his arm up and just started swinging it all around. We should have just left right then and there. Why didn't we just leave? After a couple more agonizing seconds, he laughed like it was some sort of joke. It wasn't until now that I realized this kid was actually psychotic, like something was really wrong with him. He had a couple of tools with him and told us to follow him to the moss. For some reason, we did. I was holding out, hoping that he'd be normal when all the other kids would be there. We got to the small opening to the moss and walked in. To get to the small pond in the moss, you had to go down a slightly steep hill and through the brush, and you'd be there. I bet you could feel my surprise when I realized nobody else was there. I looked at Gabe, who just chuckled. They must be late. Let's just get started, he said to me. Both Drew and I were on edge, and I bet Gabe could feel it. Hey, go find some sticks and logs to build the fort, he told me. He pointed over towards the pond. I obeyed and made my way over to the area. About 10 or 15 seconds after I started walking, I just got the feeling to turn around, and I'll never stop thanking God for just doing that. Gabe was there creeping up on my cousin, who was picking up a large rock. He had a hoe-looking tool in his hand, raising it slowly. I shouted, "Hey," towards them. My cousin jolted up, and Gabe quickly lowered the hoe and looked at me in confusion. I ran up to them, telling them my mom messaged me and that it was time to go. This was a lie. My phone only worked on Wi-Fi at the time. I felt that Gabe knew that I saw him, so I grabbed my cousin, who didn't for a second question me, and we quickly started leaving. And at that moment, he chased us. We booked it through the woods for a solid half of a minute and got to the steep part, quickly climbing up it. I looked back and saw Gabe, with the face I could only describe as a psychopath, chasing us still. I prayed that we wouldn't slip or fall, and thankfully we didn't. Luckily, Gabe struggled a little bit, giving us time to bolt out the entrance. He ran halfway up the street and turned around. Gabe wasn't there. In fact, we never saw him leave. We went home, and the next day we told some of the other kids what happened. The weirdest part is, though, we never saw Gabe again. Not on the bus or at school. Very shortly after, his parents moved from that house, and my dad moved out of that neighborhood a year later, with my mom finding a newer house in our school district. This was years ago. I recently looked Gabe up to see whatever happened to him, but nothing came up. No Facebook page or Instagram, nothing. It's like he just vanished. Like he never even existed in the first place. But I know he did. I don't live anywhere near there anymore, and I'm thankful for that. Gabe, I don't know where you are or what happened to you. I'm a female, and I was 16 years old when this began. My home life wasn't the best, but it wasn't the worst. I had been dating a guy for about 9 months who was a nice guy, but our feelings towards one another just weren't mutual, so I ended it. My mom was very upset over this. Moving on, however, I met another boy in school named Leo that I thought was cute for a while. After some correspondence between friends, because that's how it was done back then, he asked me out and we began dating. The second my mom heard his last name, she gave me a hard time. He had a European last name, and she was not a fan of a specific nationality and their treatment of women. This was my mother, who was and is severely on the left and always loves to preach tolerance, so I was immediately put off by her attitude and told her so. Leo was a nice kid. He was nice to me and got good grades. I did not. I hated school and was always respectful to other people. We had a good time together. My mom really never even acknowledged him and always made fun of his nationality, which upset me to no end. Now, my mom and I had been having trouble for years, so this was nothing new. It seemed almost all of my choices and actions were met with disapproval, even if I weren't breaking any rules. The only thing I noticed about Leo was that he never brought me home or introduced me to his parents. I knew his brother, but that was about it. Then I realized he really didn't bring anyone around his house except for kids he was related to or who were the same nationality as him. I had grown up with a couple other kids of certain nationalities who behaved the same way, so I just accepted it and didn't really bring it up or think much about it. The trouble started as soon as he began bringing me around his cousins who didn't go to school with us. I began to realize why he kept me away. They were not like him at all. They were very loud, rough, and carried guns, often getting into fights. There were never really any other girls or women around, and he didn't bring me around much. It was usually just to pop in and say hello or drop something off or to pick them up. It was during one of these trips I met his cousin Gianni. I had gone to pick up Leo at Gianni's apartment, and Gianni was very drunk and loud, coming to my car, telling me how beautiful I was and giving me his entire pack of smokes when I asked for one, because such a pretty girl shouldn't have to spend money on them, he said. Leo was also a bit drunk and happy to see me. He told me to just drive away because Gianni was obnoxious. About a week later, my girlfriends and I were going out, and it was Leo's birthday, the next day. His friends had gotten a room and had some beer and were going to have a get-together. My friends and I went out and planned to meet up with them later that evening. About halfway through the evening, Leo and I connected by phone, and he said they'd been kicked out of the hotel room. It was common where I lived for kids to get to hotel rooms and get booted as soon as the staff saw they were bringing booze into the room and too many kids were coming in, so they were going to Gianni's, and it might be better to call off meeting up. It was fine with me. Fast forward to about 2 a.m., I was sleeping at my friend's house and her phone rang. We didn't have cell phones, but she had her own phone line in her room. Most of us did. She picked it up and it was Gianni, of all people. He asked for me. I can't remember the jumbled reason he had her number, but he asked me if Leo came to hook up with me. I said no, we decided to not get together this night. He proceeds to tell me that Leo left his place around 10 p.m. after opening one of Gianni's drawers and grabbing some condoms, saying that he'd need them. I'm going to point out that Leo and I had been sexually intimate, and we had a birth control and condom routine that we'll say didn't leave him needing to grab any from Gianni. Leo calls me the next day. I ask him what he ended up doing the night before, and he tells me that he just went to Gianni's and went home at around 1:30 a.m. We hang up, and I don't talk to him for the rest of the day. I'm thinking about what to do and say here. Monday morning arrives, and he is there to meet me for our first period class, which we had together. By that time, I had allowed myself to become angry and believe Gianni. He asked me what was wrong. I told him he was a liar and confronted him about the story discrepancy. And he told me Gianni was lying and to please not talk to Gianni anymore because he was a liar and was just trying to sleep with me. Gianni called me several times after that and convinced me there was a reason Leo didn't bring me around his family and that it was because he was just using me for sex and he thought of me as too slutty to bring around his parents. Looking back, I think I subconsciously allowed Gianni to manipulate me. I was having a lot of trouble at home with my mom, and on top of this, she was mean to Leo and constantly berated me for dating him. And I just wanted out of the house. Gianni had his own apartment. After a few more rounds of he said, she said, I broke up with Leo and began dating Gianni, who had let me run away and stay with him. His abusive nature quickly became evident. He began by telling me who to hang out with and who not to, hitting me when we argued, but I put up with it because, hey, it was better than being at home. I was with Gianni for a year. After a couple more months of being together, though, I had gone back home because my parents called the cops and threatened to have Gianni arrested for housing a minor. I was beaten and assaulted on many occasions during our relationship. He held guns to my head while locking me in the apartment, telling me I was going to die. I truly thought I was living my last moment several times. Finally, my senior year of high school, which I was barely getting through, I decided I was done. I broke up with him, and surprisingly, we stayed away from each other for 2 weeks with no drama. A nice boy had asked me to prom, and I was excited to go. Then I found out I was pregnant. I had become pregnant during a rage that resulted in Gianni assaulting me. It was our last encounter. He somehow knew. He called me out of the blue after 3 weeks and asked me if I got my period. I told him I hadn't. We went through a lot of drama with this, which ended in him beating me up and me having a miscarriage. Lots of horrible stuff. Somehow, in my memory, not as horrible as what followed. He blamed me for killing the baby because I had been the one to make him angry enough to beat me up. He started following me around town. I went to a doctor's appointment to talk to a therapist about everything that had happened, and when I came out, he was walking up the building. This was really my first encounter where I felt betrayal and rage. How did he know where I was? He hadn't followed me there. I had been on high alert watching for him. I ran back into the building and he followed me, telling me I'd better stop or he was going to cut my throat right there because he had nothing to lose. There happened to be a uniformed police officer walking out one of the offices. I asked the officer for help, told him Gianni would not let me leave and was threatening to kill me. The officer told me to leave and I did. I had to go pick something up from my grandma's house and then I headed home. As soon as I got home, Gianni was outside my house, talking to my dad. I drove by and didn't stop, they had both seen me. I drove about a mile up the road and headed back hoping he'd be gone. On my way back, he pulled up beside me and tried to run me off the road. I somehow got past him and made my way to the police station, where he pulled up on the sidewalk to try to block me from going in. This is now nuts. He was at the police station. I ran in and said I needed help. There was an officer outside who had stopped him, and he had the nerve to begin telling the officer that I had just aborted his baby without permission and he had a right to be angry at me. This event ended with me being told to go home, and I'm not sure what they told him. I do know he suffered no consequences. The following night, my friends and I were out for the evening, and when they pulled up to my house to drop me off, Gianni pulled up in his friend's car, their friend in the passenger seat. I didn't get out. My friend drove off in a hurry and began chasing us, 4 of us girls in the car. He repeatedly tried to run us off the road, and you could see his friend becoming angry and even a little bit scared, telling him to stop. Finally, again, the luck I had in this 2-day period, we see a cop who had someone pulled over on the side street. My friend pulled up behind the cop, who you can imagine looked angry and stressed out, as we could have been a threat. Gianni saw this and drove away. The officer followed us all home once he was done ticketing the driver of the car he had pulled over to make sure we got there safely. I ended up moving in with some relatives to try to hide from Gianni, but to no avail. Somehow he figured out where I was and started harassing my relatives and me just the same. He would call and leave long rambling messages on their answering machine about how I was going to pay and that they were all going to die just for helping me, that I wasn't worth it. He said horrible, explicit things about me that no relatives would want to hear about a teenage girl. I got several restraining orders and had to sit in the court next to him several times. The judge always granted the restraining orders because his behavior in court was so demonstrative. There were officers and other civilians who gave reports about him. For example, at one point during one of the hearings, the judge was addressing him, and suddenly, one walks up to the judge and says something. The judge demands that Gianni be arrested immediately and calls for a recess. I was so confused. Turns out he was standing with his hands behind his back and had been flipping me off. A lady sitting in front of me called one over and showed him. He was arrested repeatedly for breaking the restraining order. My mom had moved into a new rental house and I moved in with her. We hoped he wouldn't find the address, but he started calling. I couldn't figure out how he got the phone number. Well, during one of the many phone calls where I usually would just hang up on him, I asked him how he got the number. He said, "I have a lot of things," and he began naming things. One of them had been a bathing suit I had left at my dad's house to dry after washing it. It had disappeared and I couldn't figure out what happened to it. He had gotten into my dad's house and looked at the phone book and found our number and address. One night, I had come home again from being out. It had been about 6 months at this point. My mom's house was a beach bungalow. It was the main house, and there were 2 smaller guest houses behind it that were rented out. I came home and wanted to see if one of the people I'd made friends with was home, so I went around back. I saw they weren't there, and I went into my mom's house through the back door. I had a very bad feeling, though. About an hour later, I was lying in bed, and I heard something next to my window. It sounded like metal hitting the concrete walk. I sort of listened and then froze. I got up and told my mom that I could hear something and that I thought we needed to call the cops, but she just got up and looked outside and was snotty about it and told me there was nobody there and to go back to bed. I ended up falling asleep and woke up a couple hours later. There was light that would shine into my window from streetlights behind the house. I had the shade down, but I could see the shadow of somebody's hand reaching up and feeling around the window, and it looked like they tried to push the top panel down to see if they could open it. I knew it was him. I got up again and told my mom, and she shooed me away again, getting angrier at me. She told me not to call the cops because it's embarrassing and how I had caused the family enough embarrassment with the situation. I finally go back to sleep somehow, and when I wake up in the morning, I keep hearing noise. I finally storm back into my mom's room and tell her someone is there, and I'm not kidding. She looks out the window and sees Gianni running away from the side of the house. We see him run down the street and get into an old car that I recognize as belonging to a girl I went to school with who was his cousin. He had borrowed her car to break the law. The cops came, and thankfully he had proven his presence with fingerprints and "I love you" written in the dirt with his finger on my windowsill. Back to jail with him. About a year later, I was working in a movie theater. I hadn't heard from Gianni in about 10 months. I liked working there and was quickly making friends with a lot of the young people that I worked with. It was fun as most of my high school friends had moved away to go to school. It was the first time in a while I had friends in a fun environment to be around. So I was working in the concession stand one night on a busy weekend night. It was after most of the primetime shows, the 7 to 8 p.m. ones had started. One of the managers comes up to tell me that I have a phone call on the payphone. This didn't seem right to me. I got a little tense because nobody that I know should know the number to that phone. Still, my cousins like to come to the theater a lot, so I hoped it was one of them who had maybe written down the number in case they wanted to get a hold of me during work. I walked over to the phone and it was Gianni. He says to me, "You look awfully cute in that uniform. I see you flirting with all those guys you work with. You're a slut." And people say things like, my heart sank into my stomach. I see what they were trying to describe. I felt sheer panic. I just held the phone to my ear and looked around the lobby, which was quite large, trying to figure out if I could see anyone or if I could see him. It was rare for people to have cell phones back then, but it felt like he could see me. I don't remember doing it, but at some point I hung up and just stood there for a moment, trying to gain my composure so I could go back behind the counter and work. About a minute after I got behind the counter, my manager, who had told me about the call, came over to get me and asked me to go outside. We walked out front and he introduced me to a guy named John who was dressed in plain clothes. I had seen the staff talking to him a lot, but I hadn't worked there long yet, so I didn't know him. He was an undercover security guard hired by the movie theater company. He saw my demeanor when my manager told me I had a call, then he watched me take the call and react to it. He said he knew something was wrong. Gianni didn't surface that night, and I didn't hear from him again for about 6 more months. He would pop up every now and again just to let me know he was there, to make sure I didn't get too comfortable. It made me so angry for so long that somebody could just keep watching me and that I wouldn't know when they were doing it. I suffered with anxiety and paranoia for a long time because the reality of a situation like this is there is nothing anyone can really do. A restraining order doesn't keep somebody from stalking you, watching you, and snapping and choosing to kill you at any time. It has been 21 years, and Gianni still pops up every couple of years, trying to send me messages on classmates. I ignore him and never engage. I now live 2,500 miles from where all of this happened, and he lives several states away from me, but I know he could decide to come after me at any time, and there is nothing anybody could do. Leo unfortunately ended up becoming a product of his upbringing and environment. He was with some cousins and his brother one night driving in a car on a highway. He was in the back seat. A group of guys cut them off while driving, and his cousin chased them down in the car and shot and killed one of them. To finish this story, at one point while we were still together and I tried to break up with him, Gianni told me that he would kill my entire family. He said he would kill my grandma and talked about how he would get into her house and how easy it would be to break her neck. This made me sick and horrified for a long time. About 10 years later, my dad was telling me, completely unrelated, he didn't even bring up Gianni or relate the story to him, that my grandma had asked him for a gun because somebody had been trying to open her doors at night. They were jiggling the handles looking for an unlocked door, so he gave her a 12 gauge. She didn't want to load it, so he told her that when she heard someone trying the doors, to turn on the lights and walk around the house cocking it. He said seeing somebody walk around cocking a 12 gauge should scare them off. This makes me sick to this day. I knew immediately and still know that it was Gianni trying to get into her house. Thankfully, I have learned from my fast teenhood and have wised up a ton when it comes to dealing with people, but the second you see a person manipulating you and trying to control your actions, telling you what to do and what not to do, walk away. It's the best thing you can do for yourself and your family. This is the first and hopefully the last time I'm writing here, so I apologize if it's difficult to listen to, but I just wanted to share with you, as I think this is the right place and at the same time get this case out of my head. Context: I'm a 26-year-old male. The incident occurred a week ago in Colin, where I was invited by my friend and business colleague. At 8 o'clock in the evening, I was on my way home and sat down at the bus stop to wait. I was alone there, except for a girl sitting on the other side of the bus stop. It was almost empty. At first, I didn't pay any attention to her and was busy texting my friends. However, several minutes passed and the bus still didn't arrive. During this time, I put my phone aside and that's when I began to notice some obvious oddities, to the point of feeling very uncomfortable. The girl looked to be about 30 years old, thin, dressed in a black dress and long black boots, with a hat lying next to her seat. What confused me a little was her unhealthily pale skin, especially on her face. It was probably just makeup or something, and her bags under her eyes were outlined in black. Nothing unusual. I've seen many people with informal styles and appearances, but her eyes were so empty, lifeless and glassy. However, what really scared me was the way she looked at me, with obvious aggression, predatory like a python looking at a mouse. At the same time, she smiled weirdly and disgustingly, sometimes licking her lips and quietly humming some melody. And this went on for more than 10 minutes, non-stop. Never in my life have I felt such confusion and discomfort as I did at that moment. I just wanted to run away, but at the same time I didn't want to look like an idiot, especially since I had waited so long. I understand how silly this sounds from the outside, but I simply cannot describe how repulsive and frightening she looked at me. Her face was so scary at that moment. I just knew that something was wrong, and my instincts and intuition were screaming that this was not normal, that this should not be happening. In addition to what I saw, I just felt in my gut that this would not lead to anything good. Eye contact was unrelenting. She was still looking at me and I was trying to look away, at my watch and or phone, and so on. I felt very uncomfortable, but I tried to be friendly, greeted her and waved awkwardly, but she continued to stare silently. Then the situation began to deteriorate rapidly, and her behavior became more hostile. from passive aggression, she moved on to more open aggression. She began to breathe heavily, grind her teeth, and squeak. Then my patience snapped. I stood up and shouted at her, "Please stop." I kept my distance and didn't go near her because I realized that she was probably on drugs or had mental health issues. At that moment, she seemed to fall silent and spoke for the first time, muttering, "I'm sorry." At that moment, I felt a little bit calmer and she even stopped staring at me. I texted my friends that I was still out and be a bit late getting home, and just then my heart skipped a beat. She let out a loud cry like a scream. The girl jumped up from her seat and started coming towards me, muttering some weird stuff in German. I was confused and gradually step by step prepared to retreat, until the girl suddenly started chasing me and rushing towards me. This crazy clung to me with her long sharp nails drawing blood and tried to bite me several times, tearing my shirt at the shoulders. I had no choice but to hit her between the ears, as it was a matter of my safety, health, and possibly my life. After that, I pushed her aside and in a few minutes managed to run to a small shop where there were some people. I briefly told them what happened to me, and they told me to call 110, which I did. My scratches on my arm were successfully treated by a local worker, for which I am very grateful to him. Later, I went to the police station and showed them my injuries and scars on my arm. I told them about the incident, and they suggested that I file a report in order to bring the attacker to justice. However, I refused to do so because I was due to return to my homeland in 3 days and simply did not have time for all the red tape. I still don't know who this lunatic was or what motivated her, but here's my banal lesson. Never underestimate the number of crazy people around you, especially when it comes to big cities and if you are alone. I am a grown man and was able to stand up for myself, but imagine if a child or an elderly person had found themselves in the same situation. I'm afraid to imagine what would have happened next. This is not the worst or scariest thing that could happen in life, but it was so damn crazy and frighteningly absurd. This happened to me when I was 17. I was just about to graduate high school. I was homeschooled and very encouraged to pursue entrepreneurship. I was trying to establish a photography business that I could run after graduating. In order to build my portfolio, I decided to ask a few friends and acquaintances to model for me. I asked a girl I worked with if she and her husband would like to model a couples session for me. It could be a win-win, since they would receive free photos and I would get to add them to my website as sample work. We planned a day to meet, and I asked them to meet me at a local park one evening. Something you should know about this park is that it is pretty far out in the country. The park has soccer fields, baseball fields, a golf course, and walking trails, so it is on a large plot of land and fairly secluded. The only house in view of the park is the caretaker's home, directly across the street from the entrance. Unless there is an event or a weekend, there are usually not many people there. I felt pretty confident meeting the couple there, because I was only planning to arrive about 15 minutes early to set up so I wouldn't be alone long. The park has an entrance where you can drive down a road into the parking lot to get all the sports fields, playground, and pond. The front of the park has a large grassy strip, which is where I was planning to set up for my photos. I bypassed the entrance and pulled into a little dirt section at the front of the park and began unloading all of my props. I was always taught to be a cautious person, especially as a young woman, so I took a quick glance to see if anybody was at the park. I saw one car in the parking lot and two guys tossing a ball in the baseball field, along with their pit bull. Across the street, I could see the caretaker out in her yard, so that made me feel a lot better. I decided I would just keep an eye out and continued setting up my stuff. I would glance up every now and then to make sure that the two men were still on the baseball field. I had no reason to believe that they would bother me, but something in my gut just told me to keep watching. The couple I was waiting on seemed to be running late, so I finished up my setup and glanced up to check on the two guys. To my horror, they were gone. The car was still there, but the men and the dog were nowhere in sight. There was a bit of a hill in front of me that blocked some of the park entrance from sight, so I thought maybe they had just decided to walk one of the nature trails. But again, that feeling in my gut just told me something was wrong. I looked at the caretaker's house and she had gone back inside. I couldn't get everything back to the car quickly, so I just grabbed my camera equipment and hopped in my car. I locked the doors, turned on the ignition, and got my phone out. Literally as soon as I got settled in my car, I saw the two guys coming over the hill with their dog. I feel my gut feeling melt into panic. You have to understand, there was no reason for them to come up to where I was. It's literally just an open grassy yard. If the dog needed to relieve himself, there was plenty of space for that at the wood's edge or the nature trail, or the walk to the pond, and all of which were way closer to them than where I was. They walked around my setup, and when they got to my car, one guy went around the front, and the one holding the dog on the leash circled my car. I assumed that they realized I had already noticed that they were coming, that I was no longer vulnerable because they rejoined and walked further up and around to the soccer field. Once I felt like I was no longer in danger, I glanced down at my phone to see that the couple I was supposed to meet had apparently forgotten about it and were at the beach. I was so fed up at that point I jumped out of the car, grabbed all of my stuff, and shoved them into the car. This was my first experience of how scary it can be to be a female out alone. I've had multiple experiences since, but this one sticks out to me the most because I'm absolutely certain that those guys intended to do me harm. And what kind of match would a 17-year-old girl be against two grown men in a pit bull? One thing is for certain, I will never go back to that park alone. I have always taken a liking to reading these stories here. My favorite was probably one that was brought to my attention called The Smiling Man. While reading this story, it made me relive my own experience I've had while walking down the street with my father. Unfortunately, I'm here to share with you that experience. Growing up, I was raised by a single father since my mom had a lot of mental health issues and she eventually left us, living in a rather decently sized city in a less than moderate downtown apartment. My father, a young man who was practically a workaholic, in order to support me as well as keep both of us in decent housing, would usually bring me to a nearby family member to watch over me while he was at work. At the time of this occurrence, I was about 7 and still didn't understand how to take care of myself at home while my father was at work. In other words, I struggled to make microwavable popcorn. Yeah, I was one of those kids. It was the weekend and my dad was heading to one of his 2 jobs. Thus, he was going to bring me to my aunt's home, which was a few blocks down. We usually walked considering my father's job, as well as my aunt's home wasn't too far away and we couldn't afford a car. Let's focus on what happened. Don't remember the specific date. I think it was early summer or Saturday. Around 7 o'clock p.m. maybe. I'm in my Scooby-Doo pajamas, happily awaiting my sleepover with my wonderful auntie. And my father is getting ready to leave. I grab a movie to watch at my aunt's house, probably Blue's Clues or Scooby-Doo. We leave our room, lock up the apartment, and head out onto the sidewalk. Immediately after walking out, I noticed there is a man leaning against the outer building next to the door. He is smoking something and just casually standing there. He was wearing a baseball hat, but that is all I can really remember about him. We began walking down the road in the direction of my aunt's. We get about 5 feet when he says, "Hey kid, cute pajamas." My dad gripped my hand a little tighter and pulled me a tad forward, forcing me to keep stride. I was about to turn my head to look at the man, but my dad must have noticed because he told me to just keep walking. We make it to the edge of the sidewalk and have to wait for the light to change when I hear him again. "Hey kid, what you got there?" I felt my dad's hand get super tense. He leant down and picked me up, basically making sure I wouldn't leave his side. The man repeated again, "What you got there? I love Scooby-Doo." He then proceeded to make a harsh laughing sound in the voice of Scooby. You know, the high-pitched noise he does, sort of laugh. I dug my face into my father because I was scared. It was then after I was done burying my face into my father's shoulder that I saw the man a little clearer. He had what looked like pimples or scabs all over his face, a baseball hat shadowing most of his forehead and eyes, and a very large smile. Although I believe I remember him having what seemed like a scarred lip, or a cleft lip, I'm not sure. But I know there was something weird about his lips. I noticed only because of his enormous and awkward smile. It was after the light turned and allowed for us to continue walking across the street that the man reached out and brushed my hair. I recoiled away from him and dug my face into my father's shoulder once more. My dad noticed this and swung around, yelling at the man to get his effing hands off his son. He said some more things as well, most of which was language he didn't usually say around me. I was terrified. The man slowly backed off. His hands were held up, a smile still plastered on his face. Still holding me, my dad quickly walks across the road and gets onto the other side. I looked up and the man was still standing there, smiling. After we had gotten to be what seemed like a safe distance, my dad asked me if he could put me down and we began to walk hand in hand again. We get about a block away from my aunt's home when amongst the usual sounds of traffic, I begin to hear quick and heavy footsteps behind us. My dad must have heard it too because he took me by the shoulder and moved both of us towards the building. From my understanding now, he must have just believed it to be a jogger out on the town. However, when I looked back, it was the man again, still smiling, hat covering his eyes. "Hey, you never told me what you got there, kiddo." My father had enough. He turned around, keeping me away from the man with a hand on my chest, and began to yell. I had never really heard my father yell like that. He is a smaller guy, maybe 5'9", but he is rather burly and built due to him being a diesel mechanic. The sound of his deep voice made me recoil and become even more worried. After using more profane language and telling the man to get lost, the man once more began talking. I just love Scooby-Doo, man. I want to see if I could try on those PJs. That's what did it. My dad clenched up and laid the man out clean. No other words said. One punch and the man was down. Once my father saw that he wasn't getting up, he picked me up and basically ran the rest of the way to my aunt's home. He sat me down, explained to her what happened, and called the police, telling them there was a confrontation. I remember there being at least 2 cars with flashing lights that pulled up, but when I asked my dad about this story before writing this, he claims that they never updated him on whether they found the man or not. Needless to say, I still ended up staying at my aunt's place for a couple of days. I just remember that night, probably along with the following week, being absolutely terrified. We eventually ended up moving out of there, and my dad ended up marrying another woman. We moved into a quiet town where not a lot happens, and I am now in college. But after reading the famous Smiling Man story here, it triggered this story in my memory, and I had to go and ask my father about the blunt details of what happened that night. I'm going to sleep with my lights on tonight. I just want to start off by saying that to make this story easier to understand, I'm going to use a lot of dialogue. Obviously, this wasn't recorded, so these aren't the exact words of anyone involved in this experience. I'm just trying to tell it as best as possible, and I think it will benefit me and you if I use a lot of quotes. Just keep in mind, most of it is not direct. This might be a long one, so let's just get into it. I wrote this at 2 a.m. and I have corona, so I apologize in advance. This happened in 2015 when I was 16 and still living in my hometown. A forgotten little beach town in the middle of nowhere that's so remote, it's probably not even known by surrounding areas. Basically, there are 3 things you can do there as a teenager. Go to the movies, swim, or go to this pathetic little place called Miller's Fun Park. It's relatively similar to a lot of fun park type things, only a lot worse. There's a crappy arcade with broken skee-ball machines, batting cages that probably haven't been used since the early 80s, a pathetic mini golf course, and the most dangerous go-karts you've probably ever seen in your life. Seriously. Miller's Fun Park is on the edge of a field. On the opposite side of the field, about 3 miles down, is the beach, and across the single street are woods. If our town is in the middle of nowhere, Miller's is practically on the moon. Anyway, getting into the story. My cousin Emma and I decided one summer night that we wanted to go go-karting. It was around 10 p.m., so we knew it would almost be deserted, but that's the way we liked it. I picked her up from her house, and we made the long drive down. Once we had arrived and parked in the nearly empty lot, we hopped out of the car and paid for some go-karting tickets. The same people had worked there forever, I swear. There was nobody there except for a few boys in the arcade and a guy who looked to be in his 60s sitting on a bench near the batting cages. Emma and I paid him no mind, and we went to the go-kart track. Like I said, these carts were incredibly dangerous, so I was focused on nothing but making sure I wasn't going to skid and flip, as we raced way too fast around the windy track. This is why I didn't notice the guy walking over to the fence and why I didn't notice him watching us, until we pulled into the lanes after our last lap. He was standing on the other side of the fence right where I parked. He stared at me with the most unsettling expression, a creepy smile playing on his cracked lips, and his dark eyes gleamed. I managed to give an uneasy smile back, handed another ticket to the guy running the go-karts, who was obviously higher than a kite, and Emma and I went off again. This time I couldn't focus. The dude gave me the worst type of feeling. My eyes were constantly finding their way to the metal fence where he stood, unmoving and watching us every time we were in his view. And the thing that was bothering me the most was we only had bought 3 tickets. We were on our second to last run, and he was standing directly next to the exit gate. I was just praying he'd move before we were done. But of course, no such luck. Our last go came and went, and I had no choice but to pull in next to him, unbuckle my seatbelt, and get out of my go-kart. I glanced over at Emma a few feet away as I opened the exit gate to see if she was as scared as I was, but she didn't seem to notice as she bounced over and bragged about how she had beat me the last 2 games. I was barely listening. I opened the gate and the guy stepped in front of me just as I was leaving. "Hey there," he said. His voice was dry and smelled of smoke. "What are you cute girls doing all alone here?" he said. My eye started over to Emma, who was looking at the dude with both confusion and annoyance. What? She said, pushing past the gate so she stood beside me. It's so late. His tone was as hungry as his eyes and reminded me of a snake even. Your parents know you're out? Yeah, I answered quickly. They're waiting for us. Actually, we need to get going. This was a lie and probably sounded like it from my tone, but I tried to push past him anyway. It didn't work. He grabbed my shoulder to keep me in front of him. Nonsense. I saw you girls pull up alone. My heart dropped in my stomach. You had? Are you heading out? Why don't I walk you to your car? He starts inching towards me and I look to Emma for help. With one swift movement, she pulled me halfway behind her and started sizing the guy up. This was pretty dumb as we're both small and though she's a few inches taller than me, neither of us is anywhere near his size. This guy clears 6'2" easily, but she doesn't seem to care. Actually, we're just headed to the arcade, she said harshly. Her boyfriend is going to meet us there. I did have a boyfriend at the time, but he definitely wasn't coming. He wasn't even in town, and I knew she knew this. The guy's face immediately changes, and his smile disappeared, and he was now glaring down at me with a look of annoyance in his eyes. I felt myself start to cower. Boyfriend, he says roughly. Emma didn't give me time to say anything. She grabbed my arm and tugged me behind her into the arcade. The boys from before had already left, and the usual girl who worked in there was nowhere to be found. Still, it felt safer than outside. We ran to the back and hid behind the claw machine. What the heck did we do? I left my phone in the car, I whisper shouted. There was no way I was going out there alone, and pothead go-kart guy had already disappeared into the small ticket shack. I don't have mine either. I left it charging, she said, facepalming. We're just going to have to make a run for it. Are you crazy? He's probably waiting for us in the parking lot. What about the guy who runs the go-karts? We could get him to walk us out, she said. I just shook my head. He's as high as Mount Everest right now. I don't want to risk running all the way to the ticket stand for nothing. Then we have no choice. She stood up, pulling me with her. Let's go. I swallowed hard, wanting to cry. I've never been that scared before. There was something so wrong about this dude. We made our way out of the arcade, looking around to see if he was nearby. The park was now absolutely deserted. Emma practically had to drag me to the exit. I was looking every direction every second, waiting for the guy to come out of the woods or something and pounce on us at any second, but he didn't. Everything was still. Get your keys out, she instructed, and I pulled them from my pocket. We were about 20 feet from my car when I stopped dead in my tracks. What? She whispered. I stared at the car, keys in hand. I had never locked it. I never locked the car, Emma. What? I didn't lock it. What if... I trailed off, but she knew what I was saying. She started inching towards the car and I grabbed her arm to stop her, but she pulled away. I'm just going to peek. If I say run, you run. Her voice is quiet. I nodded shakily. She eventually made it close enough to see inside, but by the way she was squinting, I knew it was too dark to make anything out. My heart was beating out of my chest. What if he's in there? Or what if we get in and he asphyxiates me like in the movies? All these thoughts almost drowned out the unmistakable sound of shoes slamming against the pavement. My head whipped around instantly and there he was, sprinting at us at full speed out of the woods. I screamed bloody murder and broke for the car, jiggling the handle as I realized I had locked it. Emma was already on the other side, screaming at me to unlock it. I fumbled with the keys but managed not to drop them as I unlocked the door, flung it open, and practically threw myself inside. I had just managed to close the door when he was there, slamming his fist against the window and shouting incoherently. I was sobbing at this point and barely managed to lock the doors as he went for the handle and yanked on it as hard as he could. Emma was screaming at me to go, and through my tears, I shoved the key in the ignition and flew into reverse. He was still chasing us and yelling as I veered backwards out of the lot and turned as fast as I could while slamming on the gas. I was driving like I was still in a go-kart, but I didn't care. I could barely see the road through the flood of tears, and Emma had to grab the wheel several times to keep us from crashing before I regained some composure. Though obviously shaken up, she'd managed to keep her tears in and be the sane one of the two of us as we drove at least 30 miles over the speed limit the whole way back to my house. We didn't tell either of our parents about this, and looking back I wish we had because there was something seriously wrong with that guy. But we were too scared of what they might say or do. I think we thought they'd blame us somehow, so it stayed a secret between us, something even we didn't talk about until months after the horrifying encounter. Safe to say we never went back to Miller's Fun Park after that. I urge you all to be extremely careful when going out at night. And to the lunatic who tried to do who knows what to my cousin and me, I hope I never have to see you again. This happened to me a few years ago. I worked second shift at the time, getting off at midnight, and would sometimes hit up Denny's after work for a late night dinner. One night, I'm sitting in a booth reading my book and eating dinner when I look up and notice a guy at another table sitting by himself and looking at me. I didn't think much of it since he could have just been people watching or something. We make eye contact and he looks away. A little while later, I look up and this guy is staring at me again. The same thing happens. Eye contact and he looks away. At this point, my instincts start to twig a bit, but he hasn't come over to me or anything, so I let it go. Finish eating and get up to pay at the register. He immediately gets up to pay right behind me. Now, I'm starting to get a little bit creeped out, so after I pay, I move over to the side and pretend to be looking for something in my purse. He lingers for a second, then leaves the building. I wait a few minutes to leave, cursing myself that I parked over at the side of the building instead of the windowed front. If this happened today, I'd probably ask an employee to walk me out, but I was young and didn't want to inconvenience anyone. I walk out to my car on high alert and get in. Suddenly, he pulls his car in next to mine and starts to get out. I'm really freaked out at this point, so I quickly hit my door locks and back out of my parking space. There are two ways to exit the lot. A driveway a few feet away going directly onto the service road, which would take me right past his car, or I can go around the building and cross over into the next door, Waffle House's parking lot, and exit through their driveway. I choose to go around the building and this guy jumps back into his car and starts following me. I'm panicking now and don't know what to do. I don't want to go home as I don't know this guy, and I don't want him to know where I live. Now I would drive to the police station, but I didn't think of it at the time. Luckily, there's that Waffle House next door with a front wall full of windows and a parking space right in front. I pull into the spot, jump out of my car, and literally run into the building. I look back outside and see his car stop behind mine, and there's this just enraged look on his face. At this point, I'm shaking and nearly hyperventilating. The waitresses, and seriously bless them, ask me what's wrong, and I kind of stutter out that I think I'm being followed. One of the waitresses comes around the corner, stands next to me, and just stares down the car creep until he drives off. Then she sits me in a booth and gives me a cup of coffee, telling me to wait a while before heading home. I left about 20 minutes later, and I swear I watched every car on the road to make sure that guy wasn't following me. Never went back to that area after work again, though I did write a thank you note to the waitresses and dropped it off during the day. It scared the heck out of me, but to this day, the thing that makes me angry about it is after telling some friends what happened, a couple of them tried to convince me that he just thought I was cute and maybe wanted to talk to me. No. They didn't see this guy's face when I got to safety. He wanted to hurt me. Thankfully, he didn't get the chance. Before I start, I'd like to apologize because English is not my native language. I'm Swiss, and also I'm on mobile, so sorry for any spelling mistakes, bad formatting, or grammar mistakes. I'm currently 19 and this happened in 2013 or 2014. I'm not 100% sure. I was 14 or 15 at the time. I was on holidays with mom, my younger brother, and my grandmother, mother's side. We decided, since it was autumn and fall in Switzerland, to go to a warm country and choose Turkey for that. I wasn't used to the mentality of the Turks, so I was most of the time embarrassed when they talked to me. At least as long as I was outside of the holiday resort, at, for example, a market. When we were inside the resort, I never had problems. Everybody spoke English and was rather reserved as well, so more usual for me. Anyways, that was until dinner one night. Being Swiss, we decided before we went on holidays that we'd manage the tip for the staff differently, with Swiss chocolate. So, this evening comes. We are getting served in the resort's restaurant by a young Turkish waiter. He was very nice and always made comments to me. So, my grandma decided that it would be best if I give him his tip. Not in the mood to argue with my grandma, I did it. But that was a big mistake. He then asked for my number and promised me to text me right after his shift and blah blah blah. I politely said no thank you since I already had a weird feeling about him. My grandma gave him my number afterwards. Thanks, grandma. So let the creepy thing start. He constantly texted me, demanding to know where I am and wanting to take me out to swim at the beach or show me his apartment. At this point, notable is that he was 19 and at the time 4 or 5 years older than me. I always said no and then decided to tell my mom about this. She just laughed it off together with my grandma as being cute and adorable. While he was getting creepier and creepier, he told me he loves me after just one day, and told me that he'd moved to Switzerland for me since he has to do a workshop for being a waiter there and stuff like that. I started to notice that when I was at the pool in the resort, he'd stare at me from time to time. He even once ran after me and tried to kiss me. I swear, I thought my life was going to end when he ran towards me. As soon as we left the resort to head to the airport, I blocked him on WhatsApp. But the story isn't over here. He stalked me, literally. Found me on every social media site and texted me things from "I love you" to "please unblock me." Calling me all kinds of names as well. Or "I'm going to find you and hurt you as much as you hurt me." Just blocked him everywhere. And after a year of not hearing from him, I thought I'm alright. I wasn't. He somehow found my Skype, on which I used neither my real name nor my phone number, and sent me a picture of him at Lake Zurich. This is very close to where I live, stating, "Hey, I'd love to meet up. I miss you." I didn't go to the city for like 3 months. To all the people that are curious, yes, I told my mom and showed her the texts. Her response was pretty much, "No big deal. He must be into you." And I am okay now. Got a new number and changed my looks a bit. Also grew up. So this was back in college. I had joined one of those freshman Facebook groups before I got to school so that maybe I could meet a few friends before actually going to school. I posted and got like 6 friend requests. One of them we'll call Jill. I get to school and about the 5th day of class, Jill randomly messages me saying hi. Innocent enough, I messaged back. She then wanted to meet up after like 10 minutes of talking. It was college after all and she was cute, so why not? We meet up in front of an academic building and sit on the steps and just talk about this and that. What's your major, where are you from, and normal stuff. Then the conversation lags and we sit there for a moment and then she slides really close to me and whispers, "Hey, if you have any tension you need to release, I'm here." Whoa. Yeah, some guys might be cool with that, but going from 0 to penetration in 30 minutes is a little fast for my taste. I awkwardly mumble thanks and say that I have to get going. Foolishly, we exchange numbers and part ways. Over the next few days, I get an absolute torrent of texts from her wanting to hang out, read sex. And it couldn't have been more of a turn-off for me. This was too much. I vowed to never stick my you-know-what crazy, and I was living by that motto. I told her several times that I'm not interested and considered blocking her number, but I had a dumb phone back then and you have to call Verizon up and go through a whole process that was time-consuming, so I just settled for blocking her on Facebook and ignoring the texts. Then she started showing up at my dorm after class. I would tell her that I had to study and brush past her. I'd be in the cafeteria and get a text from her saying, "I see you. That red shirt looks good on you," and I'd whip around real quick to see where she is, but I wouldn't see her. Just really creepy stuff. She tapered off after a while, occasionally sending an apology text, which I also ignored. And then the next day, she'd send me a picture of a stack of condoms saying, "Look what I just found." Out of the blue one day, I get a crazy text from her saying, "Why don't you want to?" I ignore it like the usual. Nothing out of the ordinary from her, but then this came with a twist. She followed up with the, "I'm going to tell them you assaulted me." Stunned yet unmoved, I went to sleep. A few days later, I get a knock on my dorm door. I opened it and there are 2 campus police department officers standing there with my RA. They say, "Are you insert blank name here?" I'm not giving you guys my name. I say yes. They say, "You need to come with us." It was so embarrassing being let out by the police officers. Everybody in my dorm room was staring in silence at me. I sit down with the detective and my first sentence is this anything having to deal with Jill?" And the detective says yes. She's accusing me of you-know-what. I throw my hands up in the air and explain to them that she's crazy and what's been happening, that I haven't touched the girl, and I go to pull out my cell phone and show him the text, but I left my phone back at the dorm. I ask if I can retrieve it and he reluctantly says yes. He probably thought I was going to make a run for it, but I wasn't under arrest, so he couldn't keep me. I get the phone and come back an hour later and show him the text from her and the sheer volume of stuff that's been heading my way from her hand. He kind of eased up once he realized I might be telling the truth. He didn't even ask, "Where were you on the night of blank?" which I thought was a good sign. They bring her in for questioning and confront her with the text from my phone, and she broke down and confessed it was a false accusation. Guess what happened to her? Absolutely nothing. No fine, no probation. Nothing if you don't count a no contact agreement. My school's version of a PPO, basically. I was very upset at that, but was glad that this big ordeal was over. For the next few years after the order expired, she would call me from various numbers, make fake Facebooks, and try to talk to me. pretending to be a different Romanian girl or an Asian girl, and I would quickly call her out on her BS. Now I hear she's married, and I hope on all that is holy that we never meet again. This happened a good few years ago. Some context. I was in my early 20s, single and living by myself. Most of my family lived about a 4-hour drive away from me. I was working for a small call center that provided, among other things, phone services for a 24-hour plumbing company, so they needed somebody on the line at all times. My shift ran from 8 p.m. to whenever my boss showed up to pick up the line, which was usually around 6 a.m. I worked in a building that housed several businesses of the same sort. Call center work mostly, though we were the only one that had 24-hour services. Because of budget cuts, I was the only operator on my floor. The only people in the building at night were the security guy who came by to do his rounds twice a night and me. Now, because the line had to be on 24/7, I was never allowed to disconnect while I was there. I ran to and from the bathroom, ate meals sitting in front of the computer, and every once in a while sneaked a cigarette at the window within sight of the screen. Only the light above my computer was on. Everything else was turned off when everybody went away around 10 p.m., so I was left in this half darkness, beneath the spotlight. I desperately needed that job to support myself, so despite that crap condition, I kept repeating that it wasn't that bad. Things were usually quiet after 10 p.m. I could use the extra hours on my paycheck and didn't need to get a second job. I did a lot of reading, and I even considered going back to school because if nothing else, the night shift would afford me plenty of time to study. So one night around 2 a.m. or so, I got a call. I introduced myself as I always did. "Hello, you're calling so-and-so. My name is Jill. How may I help you?" The guy on the other side repeated my name and hung up. Working phone services on the night shift, you certainly get used to a lot of weird stuff, so I shrugged it off and went back to my book. Then he called me again and asked if he was speaking to Jill. I said yes, repeated the company name and asked, "How may I help?" He hangs up. The third time around, he asked if this is Jill on the phone, and I asked to whom I'm speaking. He hangs up again. The next time he calls, he's breathing hard on the phone and tells me he wants me to talk to him and he's not going to hurt me. I jot down his phone number and I start hanging up whenever his call pops up, which was the better part of an hour. This went on for months when he realized I was hanging up every time I saw that number. He began calling from a restricted number, meaning I never knew if it was a legit call and ended up answering. All the time this guy keeps saying he wants me to talk to him and that he's not going to hurt me. The one time I counted, I hung up on this guy over 200 times in one night. Every time he would call, I'd say the company name, and as soon as I heard him, I hung up. I complained to my boss and she did nothing. Instead, she laughed the whole thing off because this guy obviously didn't know where I was, and he was only a voice on the line and I was perfectly safe. Sometime into this, I started talking to coworkers, and here's where it started getting really creepy. He never called on my days off, when somebody else would be covering my shift. Indeed, at one point I changed shifts with a coworker to attend the wedding, and he didn't call that day. As time went by, I was getting pretty spooked by the whole situation and the fact my boss did zero to try and stop this. My coworkers were sympathetic and told me that if my boss did nothing, I should file a complaint myself, but I'm not sure I could since this wasn't happening on my personal number. None of them could really walk me home since I was the only operator on the night shift. Everybody else was gone by the time my boss arrived and I left the office. I got a little bit paranoid because obviously this guy knew my schedule pretty well, and even if I changed shifts, he would only call if he knew I was on the line. It had to be somebody who could see me. I started doing the commute with my cell phone in hands at all times, with the emergency number dialed in. Sometimes I did the whole commute on the phone with friends or relatives to keep calm. Since it's illegal to carry pepper spray here, at one point I considered walking around with a box cutter in my purse. That's how afraid I was. One day before my shift started, I was at the entrance of the building smoking a cigarette before going up, and I saw the security guy come by. The same fellow who usually did the night shift. This huge guy. I didn't really know him, never spoke much to him, only said good evening or goodbye when I went by his desk and whenever he came to my floor to do his rounds. I usually kept to myself and I never really made small talk or anything. I just greeted him out of politeness and he greeted back. He asked for a light, so I gave him my lighter and he told me he'd been fired and he was going home. And he went on to tell me that he always got the impression I was afraid of him since I was never friendly or welcoming. his exact words. Then he told me he was never going to hurt me and just walked away. I lost every drop of blood I had in me. I went inside to tell my boss the whole thing and discovered the guy got fired for harassing women on other floors, going as far as trying to corner somebody in one of the elevators. The complaints piled up and he lost his job. Most of the time, his shifts matched mine, so he would see me come in at 8 p.m. and left before I did. I asked my boss for that phone number again to come forward on this guy and asked the security company if that was his number. She told me she threw it away. When I told her the whole story, she found it cute. Then she asked me if I was sure it was him because a voice on the phone is different and maybe you got it wrong. Quality assurance told us time and time again that our every call was recorded, so I demanded recordings. That's when I found out that again, because of budget cuts and whatnot, the night shift was never recorded, so I had no evidence. Once the guy was fired, the call stopped. I didn't work there for much longer after that. So I work for a very major retailer you've all heard of. This was from a year and a half or so ago, back when I worked in the electronics and photo departments. One afternoon I answered the phone and spoke to a customer. He wasn't very direct about what exactly he was looking for. At first he said he was looking for a gift for a family member that he hated. He said he wanted it to be something they would accept because of the obligation, but would absolutely hate. I asked if he was looking for a type of gag gift and he dodged my question. Instead, he started asking me what I would buy if I wanted to get a gift for a family member like that. I said I wasn't sure, but maybe a movie or some music they didn't like would be a good choice. Then he surprised me by asking what type of movies I liked watching. I said it wasn't anything that would really fit what he was looking for, as I usually watch anime. Next, he asked if that was something I'd want to watch over dinner. I said I certainly do watch it while I eat dinner sometimes, not knowing where he was going with this. Then he said, "No, I meant with me." I laughed nervously and told him no. Then I quickly changed the subject back to what he was looking for, and he asked me if we had a certain TV series in stock. I told him I would go check. By this point, I was feeling pretty weird, but I wanted to keep my customer service and not disappoint the customer by being rude. So I found what he was looking for and then told the price and how many copies were in stock. After this, he asked me some other question about myself, and I told him that perhaps I wasn't the best person to help. So I handed the phone off to a male coworker. I walked away from the desk at that point and made my way back to the photo department where I felt safer, as I wasn't in the direct view of customers who were walking around. I took a moment to collect myself before I left. This next part was of my coworker's interaction with the customer on the phone. My coworker introduced himself in the usual manner and asked how he could help. The man said, "Aw man, where'd that cute bubbly girl go?" My coworker replied with an improvised response of, "Oh, she's actually our photo associate. She doesn't know as much about electronics," to which the customer responded with, "Oh, I like to see some pictures of her naked," to which my coworker did not know how to respond. The customer then said it would be easier just to shop in person and that he would be back later to see me, and hung up. I asked my coworker if he was ever able to get the customer off the phone, and he told me about what the customer said, and I felt sick. I was also so terrified of coming into contact with this customer that I went to management and reported the issue to management. They chuckled and said there wasn't anything they could do, as it was likely just a prank caller. I was worried about spending any time on the sales floor, but I still had to complete my shift. That evening I was terrified. I politely asked a male coworker to walk me to my car, and he obliged, and we saw no trace of the creepy guy anywhere, and I've never heard from him ever since then. So I don't know if it's a good idea to post this on Reddit. I'm a bit paranoid. What if he's on here? That would be a bummer. Anyways, English is not my first language, so please bear with my possibly very horrid grammar. About a week ago, this random dude added me on Facebook out of nowhere. I didn't recognize the name or the picture at all, and I was slightly confused. I don't usually have random people adding me like that. I had been at a party the weekend before though, so I just figured it was somebody I'd met there and simply didn't remember. Needless to say, I wasn't alarmed at all. It's like that nowadays anyway. People add each other after having just met once, you know. Anyways, it didn't take long for this person, I'll call him Albert, to start chatting with me. This is our very first conversation. Albert: "Hi." "Hello, who are you?" Call me rude, but I honestly couldn't remember him. "You're cute," with a smiley face. Okay, thanks I guess, but do I know you? Maybe. I stopped answering then since I didn't feel like playing games right at that moment. I have a boyfriend and I was not having any of that mysterious flirty guy stuff. The next day I woke up and saw he liked all of my profile pictures I'd ever had. 15 pictures. He had liked some of my statuses as well. That was a bit disturbing. I know it's not a crime to go looking through someone's Facebook pictures and all, but it was still a bit weird of him to go ahead and like all of them. He wrote again that day. Hey, what's up? Hi, I'm reading. What about you? Looking at you. Okay. Note, I use a lot of smileys. I never really want to come across as rude. You could say I'm a bit timid even when I really should tell people what I think. I can really relate to Bilbo in The Hobbit when all the dwarves just storm into his home and eat all of his food. You are really cute with brown hair, you know. Thanks, I guess. See, you liked all my pictures. Yes, I did. Okay, so I know this is probably something a lot of people have experienced. Random creepy Facebookers liking all. Random creepy Facebookers being all stalky like that, but what happened next was extremely unsettling. I was getting a bit irritated and decided to stalk him back. His profile had just recently been created, about a week before this happened, and his profile picture was low quality and very small. I did not recognize the man in the picture one bit. The profile said he was from the same town as me and that he was a couple of years older than I am. We had no mutual friends. In fact, I was the only friend he had. I did not like this at all. I decided to confront him about it. So who are you really? Why am I the only person on your friends list? He stared out the window and I saw Albert typing, but he never sent me anything. I waited for about an hour and then I wrote again. Seriously, I'm going to remove you from my Facebook now. Wait, can we meet? He said. I'd rather not. Why? I don't know you. You're pretty creepy to be honest. Can't you just tell me who you are? I can show you. And then he sent me a picture of his you-know-what. I removed him from my contact list and told my boyfriend about it. He told me not to worry about it and that it was probably just someone pranking me. I decided to let it go. A few days passed and nothing happened. I had almost forgotten the guy when I got a text from an unknown number yesterday. It read, I have your number by the way. I remembered what had happened and I figured it must have been Albert. At first I wondered how the heck he'd gotten a hold of my number, but then I figured he'd taken it from an old Facebook status where I wrote about having a new number and that everybody should replace the old one. I was hanging out with a couple of friends when I got the text, and even though I was alarmed and a bit irritated, I didn't pay it much mind. That's until he sent me a picture. It was a picture of my house. Well, my window to be exact. I live on ground level in a small apartment building in the middle of town. Therefore, I always have my curtains down whenever I'm at home. So, he could have actually seen me inside of my flat, but the thought of him knowing where I live still creeped me out. Needless to say, I cringed when I saw the picture, and my friends asked me what was wrong. I showed them the text and told them about him. They got really worried and told me I could sleep over at one of their places that night. I agreed. I sent him a very angry text basically telling him to kindly screw off. Today when I got home, I had to go home eventually, right? He left a very unpleasant surprise for me. As I grabbed my door handle, I realized it was all wet. There was a puddle beneath it, as if somebody had poured some kind of liquid on it. Confused, I looked closer at it, in my hand. I then smelled it and realized it was semen. It was so gross. I took off my hat and wiped my hand on it. Then I took a picture of the handle and the puddle underneath it. Guess I wanted proof. Then I wiped that off as well. I then rushed in and cleaned my hands several times before calling my boyfriend. He's staying here tonight. This is really freaking creepy. What do I do? The police probably wouldn't even help. Picture it. Hometown 2003. I was 25, a year out of college, working my first grown-up job, and I'd been living alone in my apartment for about 6 months when I arrived home to find my phone ringing. I missed the call, checked the caller ID, and didn't recognize the number. The area code was from my old college town about an hour away. I went about my business, but within a couple of minutes, the same number called again. Hey girl, how are you? It's been such a long time. Hi, who is this? Girl, it's Mandy. What are you up to? I knew 4 Mandys. None lived in College Town. None of them called me girl all the time. None sounded like a valley girl on uppers. Mandy who? Oh my gosh, we have so much to catch up on. So you moved back to your hometown. That's great. Where are you working? Are you still dating that guy from our high school? I so thought y'all would end up together. How are your parents? Where do you live? What are you up to tonight? Wait, this was a 5th Mandy. Mandy Jones from high school. I mean, we'd been friends when we took dance in elementary school, but we'd been long since lost touch. Why in the world would she be calling me now? I didn't feel right. Hey, yeah, so I'm working at a local business in my hometown. What are you up to? I said. Oh, that's great. I always knew you'd be somebody. So, where do you live now? And are you still dating that guy? Weird. I had one boyfriend in high school. He attended a different school and we broke up after a couple of months. Hardly a love story for the ages. So, this is Mandy who again? Girl. Mandy, come on now. And she continues blathering on, asking all kinds of personal questions, which I keep dodging. She kept wanting to know where I lived. Answering hometown wasn't enough, and what about the cute guy from school? Okay, look, I don't know who you are, and I have no idea how you got this number. She repeated her name and said, Mandy Roper. Girl, I know it's been a while, but you should know that. We played volleyball together. We wrote this number in my yearbook, and I just came across it and thought we should catch up. All the red flags here. A few things you should know about Mandy Roper. 1. She sounds less like a chirpy valley girl and more like somebody who started smoking a pack a day at age 4. 2. While we did play volleyball and softball and all the other balls together, I guarantee that if you asked her, Mandy would tell you that we played basketball together. Mostly because 3. Basketball is the main reason Mandy Roper hated my guts. I was one of a handful of freshmen on the varsity team and, within 2 weeks of joining the team, had made an enemy of the scariest bitch on the team. It's a very, very long, silly teenage girl drama story that isn't relevant to the rest of this tale. Just keep in mind that Mandy would rather have told me to go screw myself with a rusty spork than have tea and chat. Anyway, 4. I got that number when I moved into my apartment 6 months prior, so I couldn't have given it to her in high school. So I told Mandy Roper as much. Me, you don't sound like Mandy Roper. I couldn't have given you this number in high school because I've only had it a few months and Mandy Roper hates me. She is the last person who would ever give a crap about what I'm doing right now. Who is this really? Silence on the phone. Seriously, who are you? F you, she said. Over the next week, maybe 2, I had several hang-ups at my office and a rose was left on my doorstep that my then boyfriend denied having left. I was literally clueless about stalking and harassment and whatnot, so I wasn't really sure what to do. After it seemed the hang-ups weren't going to stop, I called the friend who still lived in our college town and asked her cop husband what to do. He took the number and looked it up for me and then called the house. The most he could figure out is that it was a little old lady that lived alone and seemed thoroughly confused by the whole story and swore nobody else could have used her phone. My dear, dear friend Mandy must have been somebody close to little old lady though, because all of it stopped after he made that call. It wasn't until years later that I realized why somebody chose to pretend to be Mandy Roper. We'd played volleyball together one single year, and it just so happens that we were seated to one another in the team photo in the yearbook. We were both smiling in that picture. We'd simply gotten used to ignoring each other by then. So, somebody got their hands on an 8-year-old yearbook from someone I went to school with, looked me up, picked the person sitting beside me in a team photo, then called me and harassed me for a couple of weeks. I sit here 14 years later, still unclear on the who, what, when, where, why, and how, but Mandy Roper, please stay away. My boyfriend John and I went to hang out with his best friend named Mike and his current girlfriend. She knew about a party that was going on with some of her childhood friends who had just finished high school. We arrived to the middle of nowhere, a bunch of people hanging out in the front yards of a few homes, drinking beer and just hanging around. It was very strange to me and we felt out of place. People were whispering about us and pointing us out. I assumed because it was a small town where everybody knew each other. Some other boys started mocking my boyfriend's shirt. You're a rich boy, huh? Think you're better than us or something? My boyfriend was not rich and got a lot of hand-me-downs from his boss after he gained a few pounds, but we just laughed it off. After a little bit of just standing around, somebody decided that we were going to go to a friend's house who had a pool. We all followed, thinking someone's actual home might be less strange than just hanging out in random front yards. When we arrived there are some girls in the pool fully clothed. They seemed nice enough, just drunk. Some people are hanging outside in the driveway. I have a prosthetic leg, so I get tired if I stand up too long. I sit on the back of a truck. After a while, a dude approaches us and sits down next to me. I was pretty naive at the time and never received much attention from the opposite sex. Grew up in a small town in a different state. We were in Georgia, I grew up in Texas. The dude started telling us how he was from New York and asking me questions about my life. It was then that he put his hand on my knee and made a comment about my looks, saying I was cute or whatever. My boyfriend was there and I felt safe enough to not react, but my blood was boiling. I shrugged off his comments and laughed it off. I tried to act uninterested, but I was frozen in an uncomfortable state of weirdness. I had no idea where John's friend Mike was, much less his girlfriend, who actually might know these people. John is watching, waiting for me to say something, which I didn't. I don't know why, I didn't like the attention. The dude was not attractive and didn't seem like a fun or a cool guy, just an obvious drunk creep. His hand started moving up my thigh and I said something like, "Yeah, not interested, that's my boyfriend right there." He said, "Oh, well, that's okay. He doesn't seem to mind." His hand was moving further up my leg when my boyfriend grabbed him by the throat and said, "Get your hands off her." He started to get scared and was apologizing when somebody ran out of the woods and tackled my boyfriend. It was the owner of the home. He had been passed out in his truck for the past 4 hours, but had come to in time to see a complete stranger choking out his friend. 3 guys ran up on him and he managed to fight 2 of them off, but the host of the party had him in a headlock. He held him until he almost lost consciousness. They fell to the ground with the host on top of him pressing down on his throat and cutting off his ability to breathe. I tried to hit him and beat him off, but he had a glazed over look in his eyes and seemed determined to kill him. I laid into him, digging my prosthetic knee into his back. John's friend was nowhere to be seen. The party host finally let off of him and we ran to our car. Mike and his girlfriend were close behind, obviously aware of what was happening the whole time. The next morning, the whites of John's eyes were all red and full of blood and he almost died. I really believe that. We decided to go to the cops. This was in a place called Rockdale County, a backwards, nasty country town. I didn't realize how terrible it was until we were inside the sheriff's office. They claimed that they had gotten a report that I had taken my leg off and beaten people with it, which is not physically possible. They said the only way we could press charges was if we went to jail because it was all hearsay. And the cop knew the attacker, family friends, and they would never assault someone unless they deserved it. We had to walk away. Rewind this time to the year 2002. I was in a residential nationwide high school, which is in Washington, D.C., and everybody knows that D.C. or any other major city can be dangerous. I was invited to visit one of my friends' home for spring break. I met with some local students, boys, and all of them were cute. They invited me a night out with them, and one of the boys borrowed his mom's van. He wanted to go cruising around Phoenix and show me the sights. I was the only girl in the group of boys. There were 9 of us hunkered down in an old Dodge white van. One of the guys had a brilliant idea of doing drive-by egg throws, so they got eggs and kept the van door open as they tossed eggs at pedestrians. This wasn't what got us in trouble. After all of our dozen eggs were tossed, we shut the van door and were getting ready to go home, and this is when stuff went down. I was sitting in the back of the van when we were at a red light. Then a silver Honda Accord pulled up alongside us. I saw 2 men in the car kept looking at us, and immediately one of them rolled down the window and actually showed his gun and was saying something that we couldn't understand. The light turned green and the boy driving his mom's white Dodge van tried unsuccessfully to dart ahead or even dodge, and that wasn't happening with 9 high school students in the van. We were chased by this silver Honda Accord. We tried slowing down and speeding up and making quick turns, but no luck. Their Honda Accord was easily able to keep up, and it wasn't helping that the streets were empty. We ended up accidentally cornering ourselves when we pulled into a water reservoir entrance that had a dead end. 2 guys came out of their Honda, the headlights shining into our eyes, and they had guns. I mean real guns. They had 2 each and were using bandanas on their shaved heads. They were surprised by how many people came out of the van and were even more surprised that we were all deaf and were signing. They realized that we weren't throwing up gang signs at them. They just said, "My bad," and left. Being deaf saved my life. Recently, I moved out of my apartment. I simply had to because I didn't feel safe with my landlords. I lived in this really nice Dumbo apartment in Brooklyn for a few months with my roommate, who paid for most of the rent since her parents are super rich. Our landlords were actually this seemingly really sweet couple who lived a few floors above with their kids. The first few weeks were somewhat normal, except for the fact that every time I saw their kids in the elevator, they would scream at me before they got off and just run away. I thought it was really funny and cute at first, but then their eldest son came to visit and started doing the same thing, and he looked about my age. I didn't really think much of it since maybe he was just playing with his younger siblings. Shit got really weird when I bumped into all of them together and we talked for a bit. Out of nowhere, while we were having a pleasant conversation, the dad apologized to me, saying that his son might act strange because, he's a idiot. I was pretty shocked with him saying that out of the blue. I paused for a bit and I can't really remember what I said, but I just remember just wanting to get the heck out of this conversation now. A few days later, I bumped into the dad again in the lift. I was pretty standoffish and he was just talking about how great my apartment is and how much of a generous guy he is for giving such a low rate. Then he asked if I could babysit his kids, as he and his wife and his eldest son would be at dinner. I said no at first, but he counter-offered, saying he'd pay $150 an hour, and being the greedy idiot that I am, I agreed. This is where I screwed up. When I got to his place, I was speechless. His apartment wrapped around the entire floor of the building. It was the nicest apartment I will ever see, that's for sure. About an hour and everything was normal. I was playing some fighting game with his kids when we suddenly heard the front door slam. I told them to stay there as I peeked to see what was going on, and I saw the dad falling all over the place, clearly drunk. He started walking towards me at the last minute, fell face first into the couch. I must have popped a blood vessel trying to hold in my laughter. I asked if he was okay and walked over to assist him. He then turned around, looked at me and said, "My wife will let us, please." When I tried asking, what his wife did was walk up to me, thanked me, paid me, and told me to come back another time. I just kind of went back to my apartment in shock, wondering what the heck just happened, and I definitely wasn't going back. I told my roommate, and she told me that she also bumped into the dad, and he told her, "My wife is cool, just so you know," with no explanation, and just left. At this point, we knew that we sure as heck were not renewing our lease. We didn't see our landlords until our final month. We kind of joked to our friends about how our landlords were creepy cucks. The next time I saw them was actually with my boyfriend, who was well aware of what they were trying to do. It was an intensely awkward elevator ride, as when they saw us in there, they just went quiet and smiled and nodded at us repeatedly. As we step out of the elevator, the dad shouts, "Hey," to us, and winks at me as the door closed. After that, I asked my boyfriend to stay with us for the remainder of our lease because at this point, my roommate and I were freaked the heck out. Our final and creepiest encounter was a few days before moving out. Our roommate walked out of the apartment and both the landlords were sitting in front of the elevators waiting for us. She said they started sobbing when they saw her and then begged us to stay. They apparently apologized for making us uncomfortable and said they thought we were the pretty young girls they were waiting for. She didn't say a word to them and got on the elevator and called me to warn me they were outside. And then they started to knock. My boyfriend answered and said when the guy saw him, he asked if I was here. Of course my boyfriend said no, but they tried walking in anyway. I walk out of my room saying I'll call the police if they don't leave, and they beg me to not and run out the apartment. A few days ago, we get a text from a random number saying we could live there for 6 months free if we just gave them a few nights. Of course, blocked and deleted. The whole thing was such an uncomfortable experience living there all those months, especially knowing they had keys to our apartment. This happened when I was 14. I was in middle school. The school was about 10 minutes away by car. My parents worked out an arrangement with our neighbor Jake, who was the same year as me. I think Jake was a normal kid. Our friend groups didn't overlap, so we didn't really see each other at school aside from carpooling. I don't remember the exact arrangement, but basically my parents would drop us both off at school together, and Jake's mom would pick us up. Jake was usually pretty quiet in the car. His mom was very chatty. I had no issue with that. She always wanted to know what was going on at school. I wasn't going to share all the gossip with her, but I told her generally things like how we had a spring play, how there was a science fair, and stuff like that. I would have about 10 minutes of conversation with her, and we would get back to the apartment complex where we live. Then one day things got weird. Jake was sitting in the back seat that day. I was sitting in the front. His mom said, "I think you and Jake would make such a cute couple. You should be his girlfriend." I didn't know what to say to that. I think I mumbled something like, I don't know about that, and stared out the window trying to act like it wasn't happening. Why was she bringing this up? She didn't really know me and I barely even knew Jake. I didn't say anything more in the car. I remember just feeling a really weird awkwardness in the air. I didn't even turn to make eye contact with Jake. Figured he was probably just as uncomfortable as I was. When my parents came home that evening, I told them. My mom and dad kind of laughed it off. This hadn't been a serious violation. It wasn't as if Jake's mom had hit me or anything like that, but my parents said I shouldn't carpool with Jake anymore. think my dad's exact words were, "You don't need to be around that." I didn't want to tell anyone at school about this. This wasn't Jake's fault, and I didn't want to make him feel bad or embarrassed by saying anything to him or go around telling people about it. I kept quiet on it. I stopped carpooling with him though, but I didn't tell anyone at school or anyone else. I barely saw Jake at school, and we just walked past each other when I did. But that wasn't the end of it. After that, Jake's mom started showing up in places where I would be. I used to go to the park on Saturdays to play frisbee. Now I would see Jake's mom there. She would smile at me. She caught on to how I went there every Saturday morning, and she'd come every Saturday morning. I had previously never seen her there before. There were other examples like that. Also, Jake's mom showed up to the nail salon I went to. I had never seen her there before, but I saw her twice the same month after we stopped carpooling. Maybe this was all a coincidence, but I know it wasn't deep down. One day, she came up to me at the library and said something like, "It's so nice to see you here. I bet Jake would love it if you come over to visit sometime soon. You two should hang out more." I didn't know what to say. All I could do was give this awkward smile and mumble something like, "Yeah, sure, maybe." Eventually, I had to tell my parents about this. They had a talk with Jake's mom and told her to leave me alone, and that was the end of it as far as I know. It was just a really weird situation. From that point onward, we'd almost never see each other. I hope that means she stopped paying attention to me. I work at an outdoor mall in a great neighborhood. You would assume that it's safe as hell to be here, but then again, you just can't be sure anymore. There are creepy people everywhere, and I just can't help shaking the feeling that this isn't my last encounter with this man. I'm 19 years old, and I work at a kiosk that sells all kinds of wonky jewelry. It's usually teens, young adults, and occasionally some older adults that shop with us. Every once in a while, this man comes up to the kiosk, easily recognizable. Same leather jacket, crinkled corners of his eyes, one front tooth shorter than the other, and the same slouched way of walking. He is usually harmless, but wow, the last few times he's come by have made me feel so weird. I greet every customer with, "Hey, can I help you find anything?" And most of them say they're just looking. He always smiles at me and says, "Just looking, darling." At first it was fine, I didn't care at all. He seemed like a harmless 50 or so years old man. He always spent a very long time looking at the display and never bought anything. Most of the time I'm working the night shift at the kiosk while I'm surrounded by other shoppers and other kiosk workers. Mine is kind of all by itself in between two empty ones in the back. The mall sales have been going downhill the last few years, and I'm usually left alone. Minus the friendly security woman that stops and chats with me on her rounds. She comes by every 30 minutes or so, and she's one of the few friends I have at work. The only stores in my view are a Reebok and a Macy's. A few nights ago, I was sitting at my kiosk bored out of my mind, and the security lady had already continued on her way. I had scrolled through Reddit already and was getting ready to open up Netflix and continue watching Terrace House when I heard footsteps coming up. I look up to see the creepy man staring at me, but not actually at the kiosk yet. I wave at him and he gives a little smile, but one that sends chills down my spine. A customer walks up and I immediately jump at the chance to help him, trying to shake the creepy feeling I had. After I had checked out the customer and written down the receipt, I glanced up to see the man still staring at me. Before I could say anything, he started walking over, taking my eye contact as permission to come join me. "Evening, darling," he said, almost doing a bow. "Good evening," I told him. He proceeded to do his usual, checking the display, not buying anything. Instead of walking around the cart, he stayed by the register where I was. He walked behind my chair to check the size, but never went where he couldn't see me. Then he started asking questions like we were longtime friends. "So, you got a boyfriend?" Kind of threw up at that because I've been single for over a year now, and I told him no, I didn't. But there was a checkout girl I found pretty damn cute at my local grocery store. "I see," he said. "Do you have any plans after work?" he asked. I was getting uneasy at this point, but I told him yes, I was going to a party. "So, are you going to hook up with any of the boys there?" he asked. My jaw dropped. Whether or not I was doing that was in no way any of his business, and I told him no. He smiled a little bit and said, "Good, you're way too pretty for them anyway." He faced me again and came up to hug me. Till this point, I hadn't realized my heart rate was increasing, and it would only become apparent after I found it harder to breathe. Before I could actually do so, Linda, the security woman, walked up and glared at him. "Sir, if you're not going to be buying anything from this young woman, I suggest that you go loiter somewhere else." He stiffened at the sound of Linda's voice. She's a very intimidating woman, and he left. "You alright, honey?" she asked me. I shrugged. He's always in here, I told her. She shook her head. Let me and Russ walk you out to your car after work, alright? I nodded, relieved that she offered without me having to ask. The rest of my shift is fine. I get through it and manage to make my bosses a bit of money. At 10 o'clock on the dot, Linda and her boyfriend Russ are at my kiosk. They wait for me to pack up my purse and then walk me to my little Prius. They wait for me to drive away as well. On my way to the party, I stop by a gas station to fill up the tank. As I'm waiting for it to fill, I glance over and see the man from the mall at the mini-mart. He's buying a pack of cigarettes and he looks out the window and sees me. When he does, he smiles and waves, holds up one finger asking me to wait a minute. I obviously don't. I yank out the fuel hose and jump in my car, booking it out of there. I take several detours before arriving 30 minutes late to the party. I had to make sure I would lose him before showing up there. It's been a few nights since that happened, and the only reason I'm writing now is because I'm actually working the morning shift and I just saw him walk out of the Macy's across from me. Linda has somebody biking around this half of the mall, so he won't come near me today. But please keep me in your thoughts, guys. So this happened a few years ago and honestly is the reason I'm so much more cautious when I'm out and about nowadays. As in, keys between my fingers past 6 p.m. if I'm alone and spray deodorant in my bag if I can fit it. As well as occasionally carrying a craft knife in my bag as well. Also sorry if this story is long, I kept trying to shorten it but felt it left out too many details, and frankly, writing out was kind of a bit of a release to me. I never spoke about it in detail with anybody. My parents and sister know the rough outlines, but not the details of what happened, I don't think. I had an interview in the city center and I had met up with a couple of girlfriends afterwards. I was dressed nicely, a white blouse and a black cardigan, black trousers, not jeans, and some cute kitten heels. It had been raining and so I was quite damp. You can fill in the blanks. Looked like the result of a wet t-shirt contest or a car wash gone wrong. My parents had to go home, so I hopped on the bus that stopped essentially right outside of my house. It was late, maybe like 4 p.m. and in summer, so it was still light out and had stopped raining by now. I sat at the back of the house where you usually have 9 seats, 4 facing backwards, 5 facing forwards, so that the heat from the engine of the shitty old bus could warm me up a little bit. This guy Frank was already sitting there, but he was tucked away in a corner and I had headphones in, so I assumed he wouldn't talk to me or was harmless, but I was incorrect. As soon as the bus took off, Frank shuffled over next to me and said something. I took an earphone out and asked him what he said, and he basically said, "Hey, how's it going? What have you done today, Missy?" I replied politely and started putting my headphones back in, but he started talking again. This time he introduced himself and reached out to shake my hand. I gave him a fake name. "Thank you, parents, for teaching me about quick thinking and hammering it into my skull," and shook his hand. He wouldn't let go, for like a solid minute, and was very clearly staring at my cleavage before I even said my name. I pulled my hand away and he puts his hand on my thigh. This is where I should have got the bus driver involved or at least moved seats. Guess what? I did neither of these things. We talked for about 5+ more minutes. I think the physical touch sort of sent me into a minor shock, to be honest. I froze. He was asking me who I live with or would anybody be home when I get home. I lied and told him my butch as shit girlfriend would be waiting for me as she cooked dinner for me. I was super single, but he didn't need to know that. As all creepy old men on buses do, he started asking about our relationship. How long have we been together? Would we get married? Do we want kids? Would we need a donor? The usual stuff, really. While he was asking all this stuff, a young guy, Sam, who was maybe my age at the time, had gotten on the bus, made eye contact with me and sort of half smiled, then went to the top deck. So after Frank asked me, somehow line-crossing question of, "Will your girlfriend be waiting for you in the shower?" I stood up, told him I'd recognized a friend going upstairs, and practically ran up the stairs to the top deck, where I explained everything to Sam. He let me sit by him in case Frank came upstairs after me. The question was line-crossing for me. I think because of the way he stared at me when he said it. I vividly remember him licking his lips and clearing his throat and everything. It was insane. I got home about 5 minutes after going upstairs. Frank was thankfully no longer on the bus. When I got into the house, nobody was home. My parents and sister were all out elsewhere, and I tried calling them all, but nobody answered. So I cried and shook and threw up, alone, for almost 2 hours. I was a shaky mess even when they got home and had nightmares for weeks and saw him everywhere I went. Although when I would check, he definitely wasn't there. I never saw him again actually and wrote in a report to the bus company. I think telling them the day and rough time I was on the bus, where I was sitting, and roughly what he and I looked like. I honestly got the creeps just writing about this, even though I've written about it briefly in an Ask Reddit comment in the past. As a teen, there was a place that a lot of people my age used to go to. It was basically a large park, and we would all spend our weekends sat there getting drunk. Underage drinking was our stuff in the area, and there'd be about 40 people from all over the town at the park. Close to the park was a pub and a small shop. I and a couple of my friends used to sneak into the pub to use the toilet because no girl likes having to be outside. It was a Friday, and it was about 9 p.m. It was pitch black, and I'd been drinking. And I needed a wee, so I walked to the pub. I just come out of the pub, and a young couple, about 24 maybe, came over talking to me, asking why I was in the pub because I was obviously too young. I told them that I was just using the bathroom. What of it? Expecting them to have a go at me. But they didn't. They were very nice and started asking me about myself, telling me I was beautiful and things like that. The woman kept stroking my hair, saying I was lucky to have such nice long hair. Now, I thought this was odd, but I was drunk and thought, ah, screw it. They're just a drunk couple being nice. Anyway, the female suddenly said, wait here, and they both went into the shop at the side of the pub. I thought about taking off, but by that point, a few of my friends had started walking up from the park and were heading towards me, so I waited. The couple came out with a bag of things for me and thrust it into my hand, saying, hey, we got you some things. You deserve them. Inside was a bottle of WKD, a 10-pack of 6, a Kinder Egg, a huge pack of crisps, and a bat and ball set for kids. It was so awkward, but I said thank you anyway, and by that point, my mates were around me asking who the couple were. They said they needed to go, but smiled, hugged me, and said if I wanted more, I should come back next week on my own. Now, despite having a good time drinking and eating, and then playing drunken bat and ball with my friends later, I realized how odd this encounter was. I didn't think too much about it though and just forgot about it. I did see them, but never actually went over to them. I thought they were weird, but week after week, I'd see them hanging around the outside pub area, always looking like they were just hanging out there. I ended up getting grounded for something and couldn't go out for a month. When I did finally get back out and went to the park, there was all sorts of gossip from the other groups at the park, talking about a girl who had been forced into a threesome with a couple that she had met in the area. I never met the girl, but the story was that she met this nice couple who bought her things and ended up offering her a ride home. But they didn't take her home. Apparently, they threatened her with things like telling her parents that she had been doing bad things, and since they painted the picture of being this lovely young couple, I can only imagine how they manipulated her. I haven't thought about this in years. It happened when I was 15. I'm now nearly 25. It was only reading through some of the stories on this subreddit that it actually came back to me, and it makes me sick to my stomach how I put myself in that situation, how very lucky I am that nothing happened to me. I am always wondering how the girl is doing. As far as I know, she never told the police or anything. This happened literally last week at my new job that I've only been at for a week as a barista at a regional coffee chain. I was working a 6-hour shift. When around 10 o'clock, a customer came in and ordered our smallest coffee, sat down at a table that gave him a full view behind the counter and into our back kitchen and employee space. Originally, this customer seemed nice. I even forgot he was there as we were quite busy. However, as soon as there was a shift change a few hours later, my manager left to run some errands and would be back later, and another employee started with me. The customer no longer became as nice and polite. Immediately, he came up to me for a refill on his coffee and specifically tipped me a large amount and said that it was because of how cute and sweet I was. As I continued to work, he continued to try and talk to me nonstop, giving me very graphic information about his life, including how his elementary school was one of the last few in the area to desegregate while making not too friendly eye contact with my black coworker. I would just continue to ignore him and say, uh-huh, and oh wow, just to continue giving customer service that would not get me in trouble. I made myself a lunch though, and went off into the back kitchen, out of sight of the customers to eat. The customer then comes up to my coworker and tells my coworker to have me specifically make him whatever it is that he was watching me eat in the kitchen. So I went out and rang him up, and the entire time he was asking me about my personal life and made me feel very weird. After I made the customer's food and he went back to sit down, the manager came back from his errands and pulled me and my coworker into the back kitchen. He informed us that 2 other female employees had spoken with him earlier in the week about that exact customer making them feel weird. and my manager asked my coworker to make sure I got to my car safely at the end of my shift. I told my manager about the customer and how he had already made me feel weird by specifically tipping me just a large amount and requesting that I make his sandwich. My manager then finished up his things and left for good. As soon as my manager left again, the customer got worse. He then continued to tell me how it reminded him of a girl that he was chasing the other night at the bar. When I told him that it was for sure not me, he said, "Oh well, I wish it was." And from there, I tried to keep my distance and talk to my coworker. Out of the blue, he then informed me and my coworker of a young girl that he had tried to get with recently. We were freaked out when he said that and tried to ignore him to the best of our abilities. Later, my coworker asked how old I was, as I looked very young for my age, so I told him that I was 22. I thought I was speaking quietly enough that the customer didn't hear me say my age, but I was wrong, because the customer then immediately said, "Wow, you're beautiful for a 22-year-old. Which, thanks, I guess. Luckily, by this time, I had only a few minutes left in my shift, so I was trying to hurry up my last few things to get out of there on time and away from this man. He sees me cashing out my tips and goes, "Oh, is that your blue Pontiac out there in the parking lot?" And I said no. And then he continuously tries to guess which car was mine, and then eventually asked me what I drove. I lied about what car I drive because that was sending out a lot of red flags. As I finally cashed out my tips and grabbed my purse to go, the customer then stood up and said, "Well, guess it's time for me to leave." I waited until he left before me and had my coworker walk me to the car. I texted my manager and told him what happened. My manager, thankful for him, said he would talk to the customer next time he saw him, and he would let the other managers know to be on the lookout for him. I wrote here last month about the creepy guy on the bus who asked me if I had anybody waiting at home for me. Honestly, writing that out made me feel a lot better about the whole thing. So here, have another story. For some reason, I attract creepers, so there might actually be a good few of these stories still to come. Set the scene. I'm 17 years old, maybe older, definitely under 20 at least, and on dating websites because why not? I met a guy named Dave who seemed nice enough, and we get to talking. Get on okay and start chatting on Skype and stuff like that. All is fine, and we flirt a lot and end up doing various adult activities via Skype for a good few months until we decide to meet up. This is where the let's not meet crap begins. This is long because of my sheer hatred for this guy. Pretty sure half of this post is profanities. Also needed quite a few words to get across how much of a jerk he was. So I go and meet up with Dave and we go straight to his house, which I know. It was a bad idea, but I did it. I was on my period and at the time didn't use tampons. Sorry, but it's relevant. So I had a pad on. Couldn't see it or anything, but if you touched my butt, I guess you'd be able to feel it. I think you see where this is going. Anyway, get to his place, chill for a bit, and nothing happens because it's Shark Week. Not that he knows this yet. And then we start kissing. I explain everything to him. And he starts making jokes about it, which irritates me, but not enough to stop making out for a while longer, till I feel him squeeze my butt again and laugh to himself. I pull away, stop all of it, and awkward bit of time later, he walks me to the bus stop. It was dark on Halloween, and there was a drunk guy there who said we looked like a cute couple. I almost puked in my mouth, to be honest. I get home and sort myself out. Shark Week wise, get into bed, text him a good night, and hardly talk to him for a while because he replies with jokes about nappies and babies. For you Americans, by the way, nappies are what we Brits call diapers. That should be the end of it, right? Well, it wasn't. We go a while barely talking. I can't remember any specifics from that time except we try and get back in touch via Skype, and he almost immediately makes things sexual after I've explicitly told him not to do that if he wanted a second chance. So I block his ass. He messages me on Facebook, chatting stuff about how he's sorry and he has ADHD. Undiagnosed, by the way, but he relates strongly to it or some BS. We go back and forth a bit because I hate being disrespected and get angry easily, or did back then at least, and I enjoyed arguing because I was a POS. Again, it ends up in me telling him to screw off, him refusing, and me blocking him again. I also blocked him on the dating site that we met on as well as any other site I ever seen his face on. A year goes by and I get a message, and I think I recognize the picture but I'm not sure. So I reply anyway to be polite. It's him. He apologizes and I argue with him again, telling him I really truly never want to hear from him again and block him. Again, he goes on to make several more accounts on that site to talk to me. Same goes for Facebook. I also run into him. Well, he messages me on Plenty of Fish and OkCupid. We argue a lot there, to be honest. It was getting really weird and awkward and creepy, and I got super mad. I'd grown some balls and learned some big words by this point, so I had to go right at him. As per usual, the chat ended with me basically telling him to screw off and that he's blocked, and then blocking him. I actually have screenshots of the OK Cupid conversation, as well as text that will soon be mentioned. Things go quiet again, and then, after going to the cinema with my sister to see Batman v Superman, he messages me on WhatsApp. I instantly start having a mild panic attack, have to use my inhaler. This guy triggers me so damn badly. I hate his guts for making me feel that way, and I still feel that way when I see his pictures on dating sites. Screw him. Anyway, it gets to the point where I'm still telling him to bug off. I block him on WhatsApp pretty quickly, and he resorts to texting and calling. Most of the texts are him telling me to pick up the phone with the odd "you are worthless" and stuff like that. Charming, really. Definitely winning me back over. Bear in mind, it's been at least 2 years at this point. He's harassed me on and off for 2 years. Anyway, again, I excuse myself from my sister. We are at McDonald's at this point. It's a random weeknight and quite quiet in the car park. And I step outside into the almost empty car park. I start screaming down the phone. I don't remember what I said. I didn't even think about my words when I was saying them. I just know I told him I'd report him for harassment and stuff if he didn't screw off. I had to go outside 3 more times just to scream down the phone at him. At one point, I was literally just screaming. No words, pure pent-up anger and hatred for this jerk for ruining what was meant to be a great night with my baby sister. This is already getting too long, so I'll sort of taper off here. But basically, I blocked his number from texts and calls, and he still managed to get voicemails heard, though. The knob, and never heard from him again. I wish. Got messages from him several more times, both on the original app we met on and POF, but tended to block him right away after that. My mom was young-ish when she had me, 23, and she looked even younger than she actually was. She had taken me with her to the local mall on Black Friday and was now getting some new work clothes. A couple went up to her at one point and told her how cute I was. She thanked them and walked away. A while later, she realized the couple had been following us store to store. She wasn't sure if it was a coincidence or not, so she went to the food court, which was right next to the security desk. The couple came up to her again and told her that while she was brave for being a teenage mother, she shouldn't waste her youth being saddled with a child and that they could do a better job raising me than she could. They told her they would give her $5,000 for me. My mom was furious. She was a single mother, yes, but by choice. She broke off her engagement to my biological father a few months after she found out she was pregnant because he didn't want to deal with a child right after graduating from college. She had moved back to her hometown and had an apartment near her friend's house, and my grandma watched me while my mom was at work. She had a very well-paying job at Ford as well. She told them she was not a teenage mom and that she would get a security officer if they didn't leave us alone. They got angry and tried to grab my stroller, and my mom just took a deep breath and screamed as loudly as she could. It worked. 3 security officers came running from different directions, and the couple ran for it, leaving me behind. My mom explained the situation to the officers, and 2 officers took off after the couple, and 1 officer walked my mom to her car to make sure nothing more happened. The next day, my mom got a call from the police letting her know the couple had been arrested after they tried to take somebody else's baby as well. They were charged with multiple counts of attempted kidnapping. It turned out that the wife was infertile, but the couple didn't want to deal with the work of adopting a child. They had been following around young blonde women with babies in the hope that the baby would end up blonde as well, as the husband and wife were both blonde. I know they were sent to jail, but I'm sure they're both still there on multiple counts of attempted kidnapping. At least I hope they are. How messed up do you have to be to try and pressure mothers into giving away their children? I headed out to my local mall a few days ago, determined to do some serious Christmas shopping. As a bit of a reference, I'm only about 5'5" and quite thin. I have a shaggy pixie cut and prefer the comfort of big t-shirts and skinny jeans most of the time, so I get mistaken for a 12-year-old boy a lot more than I would like to admit. Sorry if this gets a bit long, by the way. So there I was, Christmas list in hand and ready to take this thing on like a champ. I had more money than I had for Christmas in a long time, and I was really excited to get some excellent gifts for my best friend and my parents. I was walking along on the ground floor, headed for the stairs, when I passed this lady who was giving out hand lotions. She had a few small packets in her hands and a larger bottle on a little table besides where she stood. Okay, cool, I think to myself. Grab a sweet-ass lotion packet and keep going. I didn't want to be rude and just kept walking, so I took the lotion and smiled in a sort of thanks for that kind of way. Before I had the opportunity to keep going, this chick grabs my wrist and lets out a squeal that would hurt a banshee's ears. You keep your nails natural? Heck yeah, I do. I clean for a living, so there's not much point in getting them done unless I'm going somewhere special. Sure, I said, and tried to wrench myself free. To my dismay, this lady has a hold on me like a hungry anaconda, and I knew I'd be stuck listening to her sales pitch. I was a bit confused as to why she had picked me out of the entire crowd of people walking, especially because the boots and studded jacket usually scared off potential creeps, and probably friends too, but hey. Unfortunately, all the leather and studs in the world did nothing for my baby face, so I probably still seemed easy prey for this asshole. She's all, look how great this makes your hands and nails, while all I could do was think why she thought I cared. My hands are all scarred and calloused from years of guitar practice, so there isn't much that can be done for them. I attempted a getaway by letting her know that I wasn't interested and that I had to get back to shopping before it got too late. She batted her eyelashes and said that, lucky me, since I was so cute, she would give me an entire set for the low price of $20 if I followed her to go get it from the stand upstairs. I had just come from the top floor of the mall since there were exits and entrances on both floors, and I knew for a fact that the only kiosk up there was an eyebrow threading place. No way I was going anywhere besides GameStop to get my little brother a new game for Christmas, so I declined. She tightened her hold and just repeated the sales pitch, this time asking me weird questions and between trying to convince me to buy this lotion. How old are you? 19. Where do you go to school? Graduated. Do you have a sister? No. Where's your boyfriend? I don't have one. I tried again to tell her nicely because I hate hurting people's feelings. Just screw right off and let me get back to Christmas shopping. When she stared dead into my eyes and said, so you're alone. A million little alarms went off in my head and I lied and told her I was there with my dad. She looked around and asked which one he was. I pointed out the most intimidating looking guy I could find and she launched back in trying to sell me this product at warp speed, like she was in some kind of huge hurry. I told her again more firmly this time that I was not spending any money on her hand lotion. She started walking off in a random direction, still holding my wrist, and insisted that I come with her to see more of the products she was selling because surely I would want something, despite the fact that every freaking word out of my mouth said the complete opposite. I yanked my arm free and stood my ground, prepared to defend myself if she tried pulling me with her again. I am not buying anything from you. I need to get back to shopping. Before I could even turn away, she asked what I used to wash my face. A bit caught off guard, I told her, and she began launching a barrage of insults at me like, you're too pale and your skin is so dry, featuring my personal favorite. It looks like a shedding lizard. Ouch, that hurt. I didn't put any stocks into her petty attempts to insult me. People had complimented me on my skin before and I liked the way I look anyway. I walked away instead of throwing anything back at her and headed upstairs to finish shopping. But before I left the mall that night, I marched my dry lizard skin right over to the nearest mall cop and informed them that he had some rude people working in the mall. I wasn't sure who else to tell, so I wasn't too surprised to see him scrunch up his face in confusion. I expected him to direct me to a sort of complaints desk or something similar, but nothing could have prepared me for what he said next. We don't sell that here. Well, crap. I described the woman and told him what brand of lotion she had tried to get me to purchase, but he only shook his head and told me the vendor for that particular brand had not been coming around to that mall for years. On my way back out to the parking lot, I passed the spot where she had originally confronted me. There was no woman, no samples, no vendor's cart. I later asked my cousin, who worked in the mall, if there was anybody selling that lotion there. She said no, and a quick peek at the mall's online directory confirmed it. I hate to think where we would have ended up had I followed her. I had to think about it, but I believe this happened in the 6th grade. It's hard for me to believe that this took place 20 years ago. One thing I don't remember is what our science project was exactly. All I know is that I got partnered up with this kid in my class named Brian. He seemed like a chill kid at school. He was chubby, quiet, and kind of shy even. When I went to his house to work on our project for the first time, he was apparently much more comfortable and seemed to be very outgoing. He made jokes and laughed a lot more than usual. Kept saying stuff to his mom in Spanish and then they would both laugh at me. But I never thought it was really that mean and I would laugh along. even though I didn't know what they were saying. Usually right afterwards, he would tell me what they had supposedly said. At one point, we were in his room and he asked me to go ask his mom for a line of paper. I told him I didn't speak Spanish and he should go ask her, but he said he would just tell me how to say it. I don't remember exactly, but he told me to say something like it. So I went and asked his mom. I knew something was off right away just by the way she looked at me, like I had said something crazy. She grabbed my hand and walked me to the bathroom like I was a special little boy. Once we were in the bathroom, she pointed at the toilet paper with that confused look still on her face as if to say, "Where the heck else would it be?" I was confused and could only speak to her in English while she spoke to me in Spanish, and we didn't understand each other. Soon we heard Brian having a hilarious laughing fit from the other room. Laughing so hard like he thought it was the funniest thing ever, but I was pretty sure it was only kind of funny. I wasn't worried though, and I laughed it off. Haha, you got me. Eventually, he became really excited to show me something. He told me he'd be right back, and then he ran out of his room. He was gone for a minute or so and then returned, telling me to follow him. He was so sure that I was going to love whatever he was about to show me, so I was excited too. Couldn't wait. We get outside, and he goes to this little shed and pulls out a lawnmower. He tells me to follow him. He started the mower, began walking, and then gestured with his hand again for me to follow him. As we walked, we rounded a corner, and there on the ground was a net full of frogs. There were maybe 20 or more frogs in there. I didn't have time to stop him. Right before it happened, we looked at each other, him looking at me to make sure I was looking, and me looking at him in pure confusion. He pulled back on the mower, raising the blades, and then let the weight of the spinning blades fall down on the writhing pile of frogs. The mower bogged down just for a split second, and there was a sickening wet crunching sound, followed by chunks being spit everywhere as he raised the blades back up. He raised the blades and let them fall on the pile of frogs 4 or 5 times. All the while he was staring at my face and laughing maniacally at my horrified reaction. He released the bar and the mower went silent as he crumpled to the ground and began rolling around on the grass laughing. A couple of frogs escaped without getting blended. A few more frantically scattered away from the mower, missing limbs. I awkwardly laughed with him and played along like nothing bad had just happened. I never get disgusted to the point of throwing up, and it's hard to disgust me at all. But from that point, I definitely knew there was something wrong with Brian. And until now, I've never told anyone. I wouldn't say that I was afraid. It was just that I didn't think it was a good idea to tell anybody what had happened. Not his mom and not my friends. Not my parents, not my brother or sister or best friend. I didn't tell anyone anything about it, and Brian never did anything like that again or mentioned it. It was the weirdest thing. They say it's the quiet ones you've got to watch out for. I haven't seen him since 6th grade ended, but sometimes I wonder just what kind of person he turned out to be. I've never been a girl who has scared easily. I routinely watch crime shows, horror movies, and stuff. However, a night in March 2005 changed all of that for me. I was attending college for music in 2005 and had recently seen one of my favorite violinists. Inspired, I had asked a pianist friend to accompany me while I played a piece. Looking back, it wasn't smart on our part to go at night to the college's music practice rooms, which are nearly soundproof and separated from the rest of the building. I figured since it was across the street from the campus police headquarters, we would probably be okay. Was I ever wrong? My friend and I are in a practice room for about 15 minutes when she looks at me and says, "Don't freak out, but there's a guy with a mask behind you." Now, this is college. There are plenty of stupid people doing stupid stuff all of the time. When I turned around, I realized this was something much more sinister. There, crouched on the other side of the practice room's glass door, is a thin guy about 5'7", maybe 5'8", wearing a thin blonde curly wig. The Groucho Marx glasses / nose combo thing, a hideous shirt, just a personal judgment, and the creepiest smile ever. That's right, no pants or underwear, just his small penis out. When I turn around, he waves and enters this tiny practice room. My friend and I try to remain calm because we honestly don't know what to do. Then this guy tries to strike up small talk with us and mentions he heard me talking about my favorite violinist. Apparently, he's been standing outside the practice room the entire time. He knows our names, where I had gone that day, where our hometown is, my guy problems at the time, etc. As soon as possible, my friends and I booked it out of there. He was blocking the door most of the time, so we were really scared. As we are leaving, he says, "Let's do it again," with my name. Of course, we go to the campus police department immediately, and they think it's all pretty funny. The next day, I'm sitting in choir when the dean comes in and says, "Hey, a friend of your cousin stopped by today. He said he wanted to give you some CDs of my favorite violinist. He asked for the girl who played violin with your first name, so I assumed it was you." I tell him what happened, and he's furious because the campus security didn't do anything. That's when the stalking began. He soon was clever enough not to go by the music office again, but my dorm neighbors would tell me a guy was looking for me to give me some kind of gift. One time, a stack of CDs from various violinists was sitting in my assigned seat for choir. Another time, they were outside my door. All the while, the campus security is doing nothing. Some people even suggested that I should enjoy the attention. Things died down when I finally moved off campus and stopped altogether, when I moved away from the college town. Until 2 years ago when I moved back to the same town. The first week back, I received a direct message on Twitter saying, "Glad you're back. I've missed you. Let's get together and listen to." Insert violinist name here. I reported it to the police, who haven't caught the person to my knowledge. All they knew is the address came from somewhere other than my city. Part of me is still waiting for the knock on the door, or a present left at my work or home. In Pennsylvania, right near the border into Delaware, there is a narrow, eerie place with deformed trees, closed-off paths, and lots of legends. It is formerly known as Devil's Road, the main attraction in a place called Satansville, which encompasses the whole of dark twists, isolated roads, and unsettling encounters. It was written about in the book Weird Pennsylvania, which highlights the creepy places of the state. According to many rumors, there is a cult house hidden in the woods surrounding the road, and any trespassers on the road, especially those who stop, will be chased out with a black or white SUV or truck. For years, I had read about the place and heard spine-chilling stories until I couldn't stop thinking about seeing it for myself. My friends Matt and I spent almost every Friday night at the mall together, as teenagers do. As expected, it can get pretty boring pretty fast, especially with no money to actually have a motive to shop around for anything other than disappointment. Visiting Satansville without telling our parents became another weekly tradition of sorts after he told me about his experience a month before our first visit. He had told me that when he visited with his guy friends, his phone service completely cut out, leaving them without Google Maps in a potentially dangerous, unclear area that was already scarcely mapped. Soon after, he told me, a black truck came off of a dirt road and followed closely behind them until they found the main road. It wasn't much, but it was enough for me to be hooked. Not too much happened on our first few trips. We would see other cars rarely, as it's a hidden road that is no longer marked due to excessive theft of the street sign. Occasionally, the cars would be black in color, and we would get a rush of adrenaline. It was fun, but not exactly terrifying, until one night. We finished up at the mall around 6, and we left with enough time to circle around once or twice in daylight, and the remainder of the time in the dark. It was about a 40-minute drive to Satansville from the mall, and I was tingling with excitement. According to the legends, cars that visit frequently are more likely to have experiences at this place, and this would be our third time visiting in the last few weeks. Instead of Matt and I going alone this time, we brought our friend Lola, who was very outgoing and would likely have a sense of humor in a situation that we'd be too scared to continue in normally. We drove down the highway and finally made the first turn, leading to the seclusion. Matt and I had pinpointed several areas where we thought the cult house may be, but stopping on the road is illegal, so we never had a real chance to explore. At least, that's the logical reason I give in lieu of us being major cowards. The ambience immediately changed as we entered Satansville, and the cool night air flooded through the cracked windows. In the first few turns, other people aren't entirely a rare sight. A few trucks pulling out of driveways they like. However, the turn onto Devil's Road never loses its wow factor. The trees on both sides of the narrow road lean away from the forest aggressively, not just a tilt, but completely bending in the trunk away from things we could only imagine. We were approaching the first major bend in the road, and a car was coming up towards us. It was a tight squeeze, nearly impossible for two opposing vehicles to pass. The presence of a car alone was enough to cause a twinge in my gut. Matt was focused on squeezing by while turning, and Lola was too busy cracking jokes to see what I saw, but I have never forgotten the face since then. I looked over to the white Jeep to my left, and the window was incredibly tinted but half down, looking back at me straight into my eyes like he had been looking at me long before I looked to him. He was a young man, maybe 25, with long blonde hair, a deathly pale face, and horribly thin fingers on the steering wheel. He was not at all focused on driving, as his eyes pierced me, and this is the worst part. His neck was turned completely towards me, while the rest of his body was completely straight forward. This may not sound creepy, but it was not normal to bend that way. He said something, but I couldn't hear him over Lola and Matt, laughing at our antics. I couldn't break his gaze. I was stuck staring at him until finally Matt passed the bend and he was gone. I kept checking the rearview windows, terrified with a feeling I'd never quite felt before. When I could no longer see the Jeep, though it felt as though he could still see me, I quietly asked my friends if they'd seen him. Neither of them had looked at him nor felt anything unusual. I was pretty unsettled, yet excited to see what else would happen. We turned off Devil's Road, but were still in Satansville, preparing to loop back around, when we passed a little shack that always housed two black trucks. There was no sign of any other drivers, and we wanted to stir the pot a little bit. We stopped for a few moments and honked the horn and flashed our blinkers, and then kept driving. We also blasted Old Town Road for some reason, because that was our peak of comedy at the time. We looped back around, and were back on Devil's Road when Matt stopped mid-sentence to adjust his mirror. In the darkening distance was a black truck. We giggled with nervous excitement and kept driving. It was exciting, but it kept a reasonable distance, and I think we all kind of assumed it was a coincidence. That is, until we turned off Devil's Road once more and saw that there were no trucks parked by the shack anymore. We lost the truck when we turned on the main road to circle back around again. We circled around 2 more times, nervous but skeptical, and not much happened other than an ass-riding white SUV that kept blinking its headlights. Not going to lie, that freaked us out. And the return of one truck to the shack. This is where it gets really intense. On our 5th loop, we were all very tense. The aura had changed to heavy, and it was completely dark at this point. Things had started to feel more ominous. Probably from the slightly less passive actions taken towards us by whoever was there. We went down the bends, peering nervously into the woods. Some trees were marked with 666 and upside-down crosses. Marks of other, more ballsy teenagers, and there was a distant light in the woods. Courtesy of who knows what. As we turned off Devil's Road, but still in the heart of Satansville, headlights appeared behind us. It was impossible to tell what kind of car it was, as it was pitch black and we had just turned the first major bend. Moments later, the truck appeared behind us, speeding. We were going about 25 probably, and the truck must have floored it to catch up, and it drove uncomfortably close to us. I was the one to see it first. It was a black truck, windows tinted and driver unknown. We drove on for a minute, freaking out and turning completely behind us like creepy Jeep guy, but more normally. Soon, a second truck joined behind it at a fork in the road, and they revved their engines as if in communication. The truck sped up, nearly crashing into us, and we were forced to speed up. This continued through many intense twists and turns where our speed reached up to 70 at the maximum. They flashed their lights, kept speeding up and getting closer. At this point, we were losing our stuff. They were definitely either going to run us off the road or catch us and do who knows what to us. They had these weird red lights on the tops of their trucks, and the light was reflecting off every window in our tiny Honda. Just above a small hill, the main road was visible and relief flooded us. We panicked again, though when we realized we would have to wait for traffic to slow before we could turn, and they would definitely catch us. With nothing else to do, we stopped and glanced behind us. The trucks were gone. We all expected a sudden ambush, but made the turn onto the highway and started home, talking about what the heck just happened. Came to the conclusion that the trucks had probably turned onto a dirt road, only visible to those who know it's there, and that they were chasing us away from their activities. Like the rumors say, what were they doing exactly? We have no idea, and we have no intention of finding out, as we hadn't been back since, and I still can't get the face and presence of the man in the Jeep out my head, and this was over a year ago now. I was a teenager in the 90s, and on this particular night, I had found myself stuck downtown. It was around midnight when I finally found a semi-well-lit bus stop. I looked at the bus schedule and realized I may have missed the last bus of the night, unless it was late. I decided to wait on the bench. Moments later, a tall man walked up and sat right next to me. There was plenty of space to sit elsewhere for him, but he huddled up nice and close. He was wearing all black, including a black leather jacket. He started making smooth conversation with me, and I finally looked over at him. He was very tan and had shiny wavy black hair and orange eyes, like bright hazel orange, snake-looking eyes, which contrasted with his dark features and clothes. He really looked like the devil in person to me. He took off his leather jacket and laid it across my lap to keep me warm. I took it off and handed it back to him and said no thanks. He kept draping it back on my lap. I looked around for other people and only saw a passed out homeless person sleeping on the bench. He was trying to coerce me into getting a ride with him because it's so late and he was worried about me. And my bus isn't coming, I'm not safe. I said, no thanks, my bus should be here any minute. In my mind, I didn't know if the bus would be here at all. The streets were dead and dark, and I was scared to leave the only spot that was well lit. After what seemed like an eternity, my bus finally came. It was the most beautiful bus I'd ever seen. I quickly got up and said, my bus is here. He sneered at the bus and said under his breath, you got lucky. I got on the bus and saw out the window him walking to his car in a dark parking lot across the street from where the stop was. He stood next to his car waving at me to come to him, as if that would change my mind. It obviously did not. I was a wild teen that partied a lot and would stay downtown all hours of the night and thought I was invincible. But after that incident, I never stayed out that late again, especially alone. I really did get lucky and had no intention of pushing it again. I went to school in New Orleans from 2010 to 2012, and I encountered the scariest man I've ever known while attending. My friend from high school and I both lived there at the time. We met up to smoke a small joint on the outskirts of a nearby park. She was struggling heavily with money, for both tuition and everything else, and I was smoking her out for a pick-me-up. While smoking, a man emerged from a white house across the street from the park, one of the nice Garden District homes. He carried his bike over his shoulder and was headed straight for us. We quickly put out our joint when we saw his eyes locked on us, and we initiated friendly conversation. He introduced himself as Ty. He was tan with piercing blue eyes, probably in his late 30s, and seemed pretty athletic. We asked if the nice house was his, and he said he was staying with his friends. He ran back and retrieved 2 beers for us, both unopened, so we accepted. This was a poor choice, but he was insistent. We were already pretty high, and we were a little afraid that he would screw us over if we said no. He pulled out a ring of cards while telling us how he was a model, refusing to tell us what exactly he'd done in the past. The cards all seemed pretty worn and old, but he insisted that they were his press passes. He noticed immediately that I was asking some overly specific questions and was pretty uncomfortable, while my friend, much more trusting, was enthralled. He latched onto her, telling her that he was doing a shoot in New Orleans for the Saints, working for ESPN. She would be paid, he said, and saw her light up upon hearing this. Her phone was off, so she told me to give him my number to communicate. I was pretty mad at this point. He kept making backhanded comments intended to make me feel like the outsider for questioning him. It's not for everyone. This is how you make it in this world with a pretty face. And things of that nature. Putting on a show of fawning over my friend. Sociopaths tend to single people out like that, I learned. I soon heard from him on a daily basis. He would ask how his little lady was doing, my friend. Ask for her Facebook and ask for her class schedule, and I told him that I doubted she would be okay with that. She would have been, but she was playing a dangerous game, so I tried to intercept his advances. He found me on Facebook soon enough, though my information was not linked to my number, and I was receiving messages constantly asking for my friend. I thought that if I blocked him, he would continue to hunt me down in crazier ways, or tell somebody about the weed. Young and stupid. So I allowed the barrage of messages. I refused to help him and made my friends aware that he was starting to scare me. I was leaving town with my friend a few months later for Christmas, and told him the week before we actually left that we were both gone indefinitely, as his messages got more and more aggressive as time went on. He freaked out, but it seemed like he would leave me alone in the end. However, every time I went to the park, which was daily in my last week because I was smoking a ton of pot after finals, just keeping it real here, I would see him on his bike, circling the track around the park. I didn't think much of it, nor did I think he could see me because I was with a group and away from the track, and he never acknowledged anyone being there. The day before we actually left, I received several blurry images of the original friend and me lying in the grass on the different days we came together, which wasn't every time I was there. It was obvious that we were smoking pot, so again, young and foolish, we didn't go to the cops. When I got back to my dorm on the same day, placed on the sidewalk by the back entrance I always used, which was rarely trafficked, was an ESPN press pass with the name Tyler Durden, piercing blue eyes staring up at me. It was like it had been laid right in the center of the walkway. That was probably the most frightening moment of my life, and I packed up and stayed with friends until my flight out. I received phone calls from numbers I didn't have throughout Christmas, making my life miserable. Every sound in my house I feared would be him, finding me at the address with my name attached to it. He was livid, texting in all caps from various numbers that I was a little liar, that I was just a stoner and I was never model material and I was jealous of my smoking friends, implying that he knew of more than just one of my friends. That liars get raped and he would destroy my pothead life, and he'd go into really weirdly worded babbling rants that scared the ever-loving shit out of me. I was scared to tell anyone in my life. I was the good kid who had gotten herself into the stupidest situation. I just hoped he would move on. A week before I was supposed to go back to school, he just stopped. From daily rampages and rants to nothing. I was so relieved until in February I checked my email to find a crime alert warning students of a serial rapist going by Tyler Durden, who lured women to his home, gave them alcohol and assaulted them. His real name is Dean Kelly. A has-been model from an Aerosmith video, baiting, stalking, and assaulting underage girls at schools in Chicago, Texas, and New Orleans. He keeps making it out of jail on bail and contacting his victims, pretending to be other victims who want to talk. Thankfully, I'm not one of them. Screw this guy. I still live in fear years later. When I was a kid, I lived in a pretty normal, semi-rural suburb of a major US city. When this started in 1997, I was 6. My brother was 3, and my half-sister was 18. My sister made the dean's list at her university her first 2 semesters, so we went out to dinner to celebrate. The 5 of us, along with my grandparents, went to a seafood restaurant chain in a nearby city. It was connected to a mall, and our table was by a window that looked out into the hallway of the mall. Shortly after ordering, I looked up from my coloring to see a woman staring in the window at us. She had long, stringy, mousy-colored hair, big glasses, and a longish olive-green coat. She made me nervous from the get-go. Next time I looked up, she was no longer in the hallway of the mall, but in the restaurant. She was standing at the host stand, ignoring the host's questions about how many people she would be dining with. She was still staring at our table. Eventually, she requested to be seated at the bar, where she could still see our table. I finally pointed out to my grandmother that somebody was staring at us. She pointed it out to the waiter, and he said that unfortunately there wasn't much that he could do unless she actually harassed us. So we finished our meal uneasily, all of us aware that this woman was staring. After dinner, we walked around the mall. The The woman followed us into American Eagle, which at the time wasn't so teenager-oriented, and that could have been coincidental. But afterwards, she followed us into Limited too, a clothing store for young girls. She didn't look at any of the clothing, just my mom, brother, sister, and me. My mom told an employee that the woman had been following us and she left the store. She sat on a bench outside and watched us while we purchased clothing for me. She followed us the rest of the evening, never going into the stores after us, just throughout the mall. My dad, who had been pretty nonchalant about the issue at the beginning, finally was getting creeped out and we left. A few weeks later, I saw the same woman in a car outside my summer daycare. I began to cry and told the aide that the woman had followed us around the mall. The aide went up to the woman and asked her to leave or she would call the cops. We had on occasion had other creeps watch the daycare's playground and the cops had to be called. Then she came to our church. It was almost September at this point, with these events starting in June. She attended one service, sitting on the opposite side of the congregation area from where we were. There were 3 sections of pews, one straight out from the pulpit and stage, and 2 on the sides at a 45-degree angle from the stage. My family was on one side and she was on the other. We informed the pastor, and he targeted her in a very pastorally way, inviting her to new member classes, asking how she found out about the church, and what drew her to this church, etc. She apparently was fairly unresponsive and never showed up again. We didn't see her again for a few years, at least not in any way that was as obvious as it was in 1997. My sister swears she saw the woman on her university's campus a few times her sophomore year, 1997 to 1998. My mom and dad thought they saw her at a local music festival in the summer of 1999. I thought she was in a museum while on a school field trip in 1999. Started crying and was basically told I was imagining things by my teacher. In 2001, she showed up again. Every year, the Girl Scouts had a big slumber party at my elementary school. All of the Brownie and Junior troops had dinner, played games, had events, worked on badges, and had a big sleepover in the gym. The elementary school I went to had these gates that closed off sections of the school, I assume for security reasons. The offices, gym, cafeteria, and health room were all on one end of the L-shaped building. The rest of the school was closed off to us by a locked gate. I walked out of the gym and looked down the hallway into the locked bar, and a few classrooms down there was a janitor. It wasn't just a random after-hours janitor though, it was the woman. I bursted into tears and ran and hid in the bathroom until my troop leader called my mom. She picked me up and took me home. On Monday morning, my mom inquired about the woman with the school. It turns out that she had been hired as an after-hours janitor by the district about a year prior. She had worked at a different school for about a year before transferring to my elementary school, a few weeks back before I saw her. My mom told the school about the incidents in the late 1990s, and the school seemed skeptical. I ended up getting cast in the school play for a few weeks later, and would be at school after hours, so same time as this woman. She was often at the gate, staring into the gym, watching our rehearsals. She must have started at 4 p.m. since she was never actually in the gym, only on the other side of the gate, and that's when they shut the gates. I told the director that the woman was watching, having realized that people thought the stalking aspect of this was a figment of my imagination. The director did tell the school they saw the woman on the security camera watching us, rather than doing her job, and fired her. They informed my mom that the woman was fired as well. Once again, it all stopped in any obvious ways. I was driving with my dad one day and saw her in a car in 2002. My brother saw her at the park that his Boy Scout troop had an event in once. My sister saw her at the restaurant she worked at in 2002, as well, and refused to serve her, getting a coworker to do so. She said the woman never stopped staring at her. It stopped again until 2008. I was 18 and was at Culver's, a Wisconsin-based fast food and custard chain, with my boyfriend. We were at a table eating when the woman walked in. He visibly froze, just as I did. Apparently, his family had the same issue with the woman that we did. There were a few instances of her actually stalking them. His dad owned a restaurant for a time, and she would come in and ask people about the owner's kids, but would refuse to talk to the owner or would go silent if he approached. For them, this started in 2000 when he was 8-ish and his sisters were 5 and 1. Like my family, they saw the woman in the background for years, including at the elementary school that we both went to. This means that at least 2 families independently complained about this woman, and the school did nothing about it for months, even though she had allegations of stalking at least 4 students. We promptly left the restaurant. She didn't notice us, presumably because we were 16 and 18, pretty grown up with their crazy hair and piercings and skinny jeans. But she'd followed both of our families around, just watching from the background for years. I can't help but wonder how many other families she followed like that too. I'll never know what this man's intentions were, but I am thankful I listened to my gut anyways, even if it took me a hot minute to smarten up. At the time that this happened, I didn't think much of it until looking back on it from the perspective of an adult more mature and wiser. Now, as I revisit the memory of this encounter, I am convinced something more sinister was at play, but I'll never know for sure. I was 17, and as teenagers tend to be, a lot less cautious than a young girl of my age ought to be, in a new country completely foreign to her. I was on vacation with my family to escape the cold winter weather up north. My parents were very liberal about giving me the breathing room I desired, and I wasted no opportunity to use that to my advantage, as much as I was afforded. It was a family resort and nobody was all that concerned about anything happening. We all had our vacation blinders on, so to speak. Every night after the sun went down, I liked to wander off to the pool to swim and soak in the hot tub, while my parents stayed in their rooms. When you're basking in the lap of luxury at a high-end resort, you don't think about the potential for danger. In hindsight, I suppose this is why tourists are considered ideal targets for predatory activity. Being on vacation made me more sociable and, additionally, more trusting than I normally would be. I admit that the false security that came from being within the illusory security of this protected resort caused me to lower my guard substantially. The fact that I'd already been going to and from the pool area by myself every night, with no incident thus far, only heightened my cavalier nonchalance. While my parents gave me the breathing room to enjoy my independence, I was here to make friends and have a good time. I didn't care about much else. So, just like any other night during my stay, I was lounging in the hot tub, chattering amongst the guests, all of my worries completely forgotten for the moment. I was getting a lot of attention, mainly because it was apparent that I was Canadian, and all the guests amongst me were apparently fascinated by this. I was barraged with questions, some of which I could not decipher whether they were genuine or trolling. Yes, we do have heat and electricity up north. I kid you not, I was actually asked this. Amongst this group of people, I was particularly invested in this conversation I was having with a much older man, who came off as nothing but warm and friendly. He had claimed he too was on vacation with his family, but they were nowhere to be seen. In fact, he, not including me of course, was the only one who seemed to not know anyone there. Everybody else was with their families. I figured that was normal enough. However, because I too was vacationing with my family, and they were nowhere in sight either. What strikes me as odd, however, is how he seemed to be engaging only me in conversation and ignoring everybody else. He was nearly 3 times my age. Doesn't help matters. As the night progressed, people began retreating to their rooms, leaving just me, this man and a few others. It was around this time that he shared with me what room he was staying at before asking, innocently, where I was staying. Foolishly told him, but only the sectional area. Although he had asked which room specifically, I had enough sense to not divulge that much. Things didn't take a particularly unsettling turn until I began to notice how eerily quiet things had become. There was still some people around, but it was just me and him in the hot tub now. I took this as my cue to start heading back. Bidding him goodbye, I got up to leave, but he instantly stopped me, insisted that he walk me back to my room, as it's not safe for a pretty little thing like me to be wandering around the resort by myself at this late hour of the night. I took this with concern akin to a protective uncle, but waved off the supposed hospitality, insisting I would be alright. He became more persistent, switching from concerned guardian to fear-mongerer. He told me how bad things happen to young girls like me without an escort. As he droned on about the dangers that might surely befall me as a young female on vacation, with no parents around to guard me, a small defenseless young girl. I felt the first wave of unease wash over me. I shook it off and smiled warmly, telling him thank you, but that I would manage fine on my own. He seemed to deflate as his expression became more exasperated. At least let me walk you part of the way there until I know you're safe. This puzzled me. If there were predators lurking, how would I be any safer walking from the halfway point than from where I was now, besides it being a shorter trek? Nevertheless, this show of concern was beginning to wear me down. He had gotten me thinking about how dark it was now, and the vulnerable position I was in. He was right, kind of. I practically had a target on my back. Okay. I nodded after a moment of hesitation. I was young and naive and thought it to be an advantage to have somebody bigger and stronger walk with me. I knew I was incredibly foolish and a sheltered teenager, with far too much faith in humanity as a whole. Very unlike the cynical and distrustful woman I am now who always follows her gut. I also, as annoyingly typically as this sounds, did not want to be rude. Fortunately, I have since grown out of my people-pleasing complex and will not hesitate to say no when I feel weird at the first sign of a red flag, but I had yet to develop this quality then. I hesitantly relented. At the moment, my fear of coming off as rude to an adult overrode that of any subconscious or otherwise concern I had for my safety. His eyes lit up and he nodded approvingly. Good. Let's get going then. It's late and your parents will worry. I ignored the twisting in my gut and rose from the hot tub, shivering from the sudden exposure of the cold air. Suddenly feeling too exposed, I hastily fastened my towel around myself, padded towards the lockers. At this point, I was just determined to get back to safety and warmth of my hotel room. It was only as I was getting closer to leaving that I began to get this sinking feeling in my stomach that something about this whole night just wasn't right. My suspicions were further affirmed as I took note of my escort following me. The lockers were outside and the women's changing room was to the left of them. I was going to retrieve my clothes from the locker, change in the locker room, and then go. With this complete stranger who I didn't know at all. I noticed he was standing a little too closely now, and I instinctively shrunk away from him. This definitely wasn't right, but it wasn't until I was shakily pulling my top on over my soaked bikini top, having already decided I would skip the locker room, which regrettably accented my womanly curves a little bit more than I was comfortable with at the moment, and which he seemed to notice as well, that I decided I could not wander off with this strange man that I hardly knew. Any last bit of false security had waned away the moment I felt his eyes on me, watching me dress, his eyes clearly appraising my body. I shivered again, this time not from the cold. As I pulled on the rest of my clothes, I had already made my decision. You know, I really appreciate you offering to walk me back, but I think I'll manage after all. Thank you, though. He grew solemnly quiet, which stirred a growing sense of malice within me as I began to feel more and more validated in my decision to not go off with this man. Are you sure? He pressured. I would hate for anything to happen to you. I nodded more insistently and forced a smile. Nah, it's alright, I'll be fine, thanks. Okay, he said quietly as I practically started running for the exit. While still in earshot behind me, I heard him say, You be careful now. You never know who might be out there. As soon as I was out of sight, I began bolting and was stopped in my tracks, instantly by the second wave of impending dread to hit me that night. I decided against walking back on foot and headed towards the on-resort shuttle instead. On the way, on two separate occasions within the space of no more than 10 minutes, two older men in their 50s made a pass at me, and at the shuttle stop, a group of men in a car offered to give me a ride, but I ended up making it back to safety from the shuttle without any further incident. Later, I wrote it off as paranoia and convinced myself that he really was just a hospital older man with a young girl's best interest at heart. But now that I know from personal experience how the men that seem the nicest with seemingly good intentions can often be the worst predators, I am convinced I made the right decision that night. So this happened a few months ago. My best friend P and I had just gotten out of school. We decided to get ice cream after school, and before we know it, it's 6 p.m. We leave the ice cream shop, which happens to be right next to the liquor store. Small city. We notice this shady guy standing outside the store, and we try to brush it off, but There's just something not right about him. A woman leaves the liquor store and she's dressed nicely in a dress and heels. She starts walking and before we know it, the guy starts following her. My friend and I get concerned, so we decide to tail him a little bit to make sure he doesn't have any bad intentions. Things escalate when we realize that he's filming this woman and she has no idea. It's disgusting. He's following her and has his phone out trying to get a better video of what's under her skirt. P and I look at each other and have a mutual understanding. We know we have to do something, so we take a deep breath and somehow manage to put ourselves between the woman and the man. We hear him curse, but we don't dare turn around. We are spread apart, making sure there's no way he can get her on film. Mind you, we're both 5'1", 17-year-old girls. Our hearts are racing, but we don't move away until the woman safely enters a restaurant, which is about 2 blocks away. She's in the restaurant, but this guy does not want to give up. He's waiting outside for her. He's lingering and even tries to peer inside through a window. P and I know we have to tell the woman what's going on, just in case he tries something. So we step inside this fancy restaurant and spot the woman on a date with her boyfriend. Tap her on the shoulder and I fill her in. She's shocked that he followed her for 2 blocks and that she had no idea. I let her know that he's waiting outside and give her his description, just in case he follows her anywhere else. She thanks us profusely and even gives us a hug. P and I leave the restaurant feeling relieved because we both know that we cannot live with ourselves if something were to happen to her. I'm a 22-year-old female and come from the US, but am currently living in Germany for a work study. I am traveling alone, but I am fluent in German and I've always been fairly confident in my ability to live alone and defend myself, considering I stand at about 5'11" and carry 3 different forms of self-defense on me at all times. I've been here for a little over a month and I absolutely love everything about it, besides this experience of course. This happened roughly 3 weeks ago. After exploring my semi-large home city in Germany for a few weeks, I wanted to check out a nearby country. I've always been jealous of how Europeans can travel. Countries like Americans can travel from state to state, and my dad generously offered to pay for my travels while I'm living here. So I wanted to take advantage of that and experience a different culture. After doing lots of research, I decided upon the Netherlands. I've always been curious about Dutch culture, and I was very excited to do some more exploring, even if just for a weekend. I chose a small city in the south of the Netherlands, so I only traveled about 4.5 hours to get there. I had some lovely Dutch food and got to experience the Saturday market in the city center, which was filled with local goods. Now for the juicy part. On my last day in the Netherlands, I decided to check out a local Dutch coffee shop. Most of you probably know, but some Dutch coffee shops sell weed for recreational use and have areas where you can smoke and talk to people. Since I've never been to anything like this before, I was super excited and nervous. I smoke relatively frequently back home, so I wasn't going into this completely blind though. When I walked in, I had to register for an account, and the staff took my picture and passport and gave me an account number. I was a little uneasy about this, considering I didn't want my passport and a coffee club account to go hands in hand, but I've heard that several coffee shops do this, so I wasn't super worried. I then went to the counter and bought the weakest strain they had, White Widow I think, which is definitely not considered weak in the US. Also, it was like 5 for half a gram, so that was pretty damn fantastic. I didn't want to bring the bud across borders because I didn't want to risk getting torn in half by the German police, so I decided I'd find someone to smoke with and grab a train afterwards. It was only about 1:30 p.m. as I made my way to the chill zone, a hazy room filled with foreigners and locals, all ripping bonks and dragging blunts. Amongst quite a few 20-something-year-old men, I see 2 girls sitting alone at a table for 4, and I ask if I can join. They happily oblige and we start chatting. They introduced themselves as Alex and Jen. Both of them were Germans, and when I mentioned that I'm from the US, they got super excited, started gushing about how awesome California must be, to which I've never even been. Not even after a minute that I'm talking to Alex and Jen, some lanky, freaky looking boy looks over from a different table and says, "Oh, you're from the US? We were just talking about how we wish we could afford to travel there. Immediately after saying this, he sits down across from me, despite the fact that nobody invited him to. Looks-wise, this guy appeared to be anywhere between 25 and 30, relatively scraggly with big hazed-over brown eyes, shaggy brown hair, and a very large mouth, which was always slightly ajar. Though he was slightly unkempt, he seemed relatively normal, despite inviting himself to pop a squat with us. This lurky boy starts asking us normal questions. Where we are from, where we work, how do you like the Netherlands, and stuff. The way he spoke was slightly slurred though, as if he had been drinking, but I couldn't smell alcohol on him, and he didn't seem drunk. He was consistently hard to understand, with an accent that was possibly Dutch. For a moment, I thought he might have a mental disability, so I didn't want to be rude to him and say I couldn't understand him. It also occurred to me that he might just be attempting to flirt and failing miserably, so I didn't really see him as a threat. I mostly nodded at what he said or threw in a yeah for sure, here or there, while Alex and Jen were relatively quiet. Something about him was off-putting to me. I just couldn't figure out what it was. After a few minutes of barely coherent conversation, Alex asks this guy if he can roll us a joint since none of us know how to. He says yes and offers to grind our bud. We give him the go-ahead and he suddenly takes all of it and leaves the chill zone to grind it at the bar. This is where I started to get concerned. Tons of people in the chill zone had grinders right in front of them, and there was no reason for him to leave to grind our weed. I began to worry he might put something in it. Alex and Jen both admit that it freaks them out too, and I decide to keep an eye on him through the glass door, though he had his back to us. I'm closely watching him when he turns around and gives me this wide toothy smile, almost like he was laughing. I instantly got the chills. He continued to stare directly at me, smiling, as he spent 10 minutes grinding our bud. This guy wanders back in and hands each of us our small bags of bud and then grabs a paper to start rolling. I am not shitting you when I say that he took 30 minutes to roll one loose, horrible joint. His hands were shaking the entire time, almost violently. I started to wonder if he was on something else. The joint immediately falls apart and he asks Alex, who was sitting directly next to him, to lick it and fix it. He's smiling and staring intently at her as she's about to lick it, and she says, "You really don't have to watch me do it, you know." He responds again with some incoherent jibber-jabber as I turn to the girls sitting behind me and ask if they could roll a joint for me. They do so in less than a few minutes. The crappy joint falls apart about 3 more times, and we decide to just smoke the one that the girls rolled, as we all wanted this guy to get the heck away from us at this point. I come up with a half-assed plan as we light it, and I say, "Hey, we appreciate you helping us, but these are my friends that I haven't seen since the last time I was in Germany, and we just really want to catch up and have some girl time. Seems nice enough." He responded with, "Well, you guys can talk with me right here. I don't have to leave." Alex immediately repeats the same thing I said, phrased a bit differently, and he says, "I'm standing here. You can pretend you're alone and just talk with me here." At this point, alarm bells are starting to go off. Stu isn't leaving, and I can't think of anything to say to make him go. Jen has been quiet almost the whole time, staring at the table, but Alex is starting to realize that we really need to do something. Alex says to him, "Please, we don't want to be rude. We just haven't seen each other in so long, and we really want to catch up one-on-one." He aggressively shoots back with, "How did you all meet then? Where did you meet? In what city? Why are all of your friends?" And then directed at me, "Why were you in Germany, and where were you?" Dang. Now I need a real story, or at least one convincing enough to shoo him away. Say something along the lines of, "I was visiting this big city in Germany to find an apartment for my upcoming work study, and I met them in a pub. Started talking, realized we had a lot in common, and decided to stay in touch since I knew I wouldn't have a lot of friends when I moved here." Sounds legit. This guy nods and seems convinced enough. Alex immediately follows with, "So can you please go back to your friends so we can talk?" He says yet again, "I don't need to leave for you all to talk." He then says we should start fresh and asks me and only me what my name is, while extending a shaking hand. Suddenly, every story I've read on here is rushing back to me as I realize all the things I've done wrong. Told them where I work, live, where I'm from. Man, this isn't good. My name is my last saving grace. I blurt out a fake name. Trisha. He repeats my name, but doesn't tell me his. Now I've reached my limit. We tried being polite, but to no avail. We've spent over an hour dealing with this creepy dude, and we've all had enough of it. I look him dead in the eyes and sternly say, "You're making us uncomfortable. Please leave us alone." He leans in until he's only a few inches from my face, his eyes almost quivering, as he says in a quiet, low tone, "I know people at your work, people that are above you. You really don't want to mess with me, because I could ruin your life." As he says this, it's as though the slurring in his voice vanishes. I feel the blood draining from my face and my head starts tingling. I almost feel like I'm about to burst into tears or throw up. Maybe both. I grab my bag and say, "I'm going to leave. You're seriously making us feel weird, and I really don't want to talk to you anymore." And then the final blood-curdling comment from him. "I think we'll be on the same train. Now that I know where you live, I think it's time for me to go too." I rush outside in a panic, borderline hyperventilating as Alex and Jen follow suit. We simultaneously say, "What the heck?" and hurry away from the coffee shop. We end up exchanging numbers and going our separate ways. Now for a slightly happier ending. After I sprinted to the train station, I realized that I had left my pre-marked bag at the coffee shop. I honestly hesitated as I really didn't want to run into this guy again, but I really wanted my useless goodies, so I ran back. I stood outside, briefly explained to the security guard what happened and why I left so quickly, and he said, "We saw what happened and we kicked him out. So sorry for that. He's not allowed back here again," and handed me my bag. I honestly believe that without Alex and Jen there, things would have gone very differently. I think this dude had some seriously messed up intentions, and the only thing stopping him was the fact that we were all together. I came across this subreddit a few days ago and thought I'd share my experience. This happened to me back in 2005, right after I graduated from uni. I live in a small town near the outskirts of London. It's not creepy or out of the way or anything, but it can get quite deserted at night. The night in question, I and a bunch of mates were going to all get together and go down to Fabric in central London. I was getting ready to leave the house when my girlfriend Sarah called with a bit of a problem, prompting me to tell my friends that they should go on without me and I'll meet them there. I hopped on the bus and headed to hers. A few hours later, I'd helped her sort through her crisis and was thinking I'd better make a move on and head to the club. I asked if she wanted to come. Several times she insisted that she felt better and wanted to stay at home. Knowing better than to test her resolve, I left it at that and called a minicab. I was waiting for the cab at the front of the driveway when Sarah joined me for the wait. We were kissing when the car drove up. This was my first sign that something was wrong. We didn't hear him pull up because he was driving really slowly with the headlights off. The only reason he grabbed our attention was because he turned on his bright lights at us. It was an old cream-colored Mercedes station wagon. I ignored whatever apprehension I had because I thought I just had an overactive imagination. Okay, so he pulled up quietly. So what? Knowing what I do now, I'm so happy Sarah never agreed to come with me. I got in the cab and told a guy who was in his mid-40s that I wanted to head to Fabric in central London. He just nodded his head while looking into his driver's side wing mirror. I said, "Did you hear me, mate?" He nods again, this time also letting a yes slip out. "That's quite a fare," he said, all the while staring at the window. That's when I realized what he was staring at in his mirror. Sarah walking back up to the driveway. I was about to react when she got to the front door, but the cabbie beat me to it, turning and saying, "Can't have the little lady going on unescorted now, can we?" All manner of deviance out there. This threw me a bit as his whole behavior was off, but I also knew that's what I would have done had it been the other way around, and maybe this guy had kids himself. I decided to just talk to him and break the ice, and after about 5 minutes, I felt at ease as we slipped into a familiar conversation. Football and women. It was all okay until he started telling me about his ex and best friends. how they had been hooking up behind his back, about how he kicked the ever-living shit out of his friend for it. Then he started fixating on his ex, saying how all women were whores and liars and were only out for themselves, that men are only there to pay off their debts and wants. He even tried to justify a time when he kicked the shit out of her, saying that men can't be excused for their actions if appropriately provoked. Then it got even weirder. He started talking to me about men, trans men, how he liked that they were the best of both worlds, that they were something he could fuck, but that they were also wired like men and not out to get you. Those she-men are tighter than a twisted screw. I like it when they bleed a little on my you-know-what. Though some ladies are mighty fine, like that ass of yours. He turned to stare at me through the mirror, almost testing my reaction. I'm man enough to say that I was freaking the heck out by this point, not only at the conversation, but at the fact that the mobile phone I'd forgotten to charge had died halfway through its rant. Not one to show my fear, I asked him to stop off at an ATM so I could get cash out to pay him at the end of the journey. He agrees, and for a moment I feel like it's all going to be over in a second, when he says that before he does that, he needs to stop to take a piss. That's even better, I thought. I can sneak out when he's peeing and bolt off. He turned off the main road and went through a random residential area before we finally found ourselves going down a dirt road and heading towards the woods. Mate, where the heck are we going? You can't take a pee anywhere. He replied, somewhere along the lines that it was safer in the woods. That's when I noticed it. This particular car had no unlock feature in the back, and a very quiet, slow tug on the door handle revealed that the child lock was on. I was trapped. He stopped the car near the edge of the woods and turned and asked if I wanted to join him. I declined and said that I was in a hurry and asked him to hurry himself. This seemed to anger him and he slammed the door and vanished. I waited about 1 minute and tried to climb out the driver's side, but it was locked too, and I was scared that my movement had alerted the cabbie just outside. Having tried and failed to restart my phone, I looked around to see if he'd left a phone or some kind of device that I could communicate with, but nothing. After nearly 10 minutes had gone by, I worked myself up to smashing the windows, figuring that this was in no way a normal situation and that abnormal measures could be taken. Just as I was getting into position, I heard a loud crash. It sounded like a massive branch had just hit the leaves below. I froze, not moving a muscle, not even my lungs. I wanted to be able to hear everything just at that moment. As my ears slowly tuned in, I began to hear two very distinct sounds, but both in intervals. The first was a rustling sound, but it wasn't the wind. It sounded more like birds flying through the trees all at once. The second was a squelching slam. The slam only occurred 3 times, whereas the rustling was quite often. Then silence again. I decided not to wait any longer. My imagination was going wild as to what those sounds were, and I just wanted to get away as fast as my legs could carry me. I used to be on the track team. I leaned back and thrust my legs out as hard as I could and kicked the backseat window through. It shattered and I wasted no time in shimmying through the broken window and outside. That's when it happened. My eyes focused in the dark and I began to see that the ground was littered all around me with clothes. Children's clothes, and the odd toy. I was so busy looking around that I didn't notice him walk straight up to me from behind and grab me by the nape. He was obviously way stronger than me. Where are you going, friend? I still need to take you down Central. I noticed his shirt was off. He was sweating profusely and was covered in dirt. And in his hands he had a knife. A full-on kitchen knife, and there was something on it. I said, "What the heck, man? What the heck are you doing?" He replied something to the effect that he had some foul traps out in the woods and was checking on them for game. He offered to show me, recognizing that if I went with him, it would probably be the last choice I make. I twisted my body as much as I could and punched him square in the face. I ran as fast as I could. He yelled after me, "See you soon." I ignored him and kept running. Even though we had driven quite far, at least 5 or 6 miles, I still legged it all the way back and straight to the cops and told them everything I remembered. They said they could go and check it out and sent me home in a squad car. The next morning, I called Sarah and went over right away to check on her. I still wasn't over the way the creepy cabbie had been staring at her, and since he had picked me up from hers, he knew where she lived. I told her the whole story. When I was done, she just stared at me in disbelief, not sure what to say, and hugged me. At that point, the police rang and I went outside to take the call. They told me that they went to check the specific area I mentioned, finding none of the clothes or toys I said I had seen. Neither was there any sign of foul traps or a knife. They did mention finding a few pieces of cut up rope, but with nothing to go on, they just insinuated I was having a laugh at their expense. I then called the minicab company, figuring I could at least lodge a complaint against the wacko. The idea that this could have provoked him didn't enter my head at the time. They said they had no record of a car picking me up that night. One had been sent, but by the time it arrived, nobody was waiting. This creeped me out all over again. How had he found me then? Was it random? Was I chosen? Could he have been listening in to their private car radio network or something? I left Sarah's and headed back to mine, and she was going to join me after helping her mom do some chores, and I wanted to go chill for a while. I should mention at this point that Sarah and I are now happily married, going on 8 years, and that all is well. However, that day, after I got home from hers and took a shower, I wandered off to the window. What I saw sent a chill down my spine, and still does whenever I think about it. I saw it, that cream-colored Mercedes station wagon, and the crazy cabbie staring at me with such a cold, empty look on his face, until he slowly smiled and drove off. He told me I'd see him again. He wanted me to see him, wanted me to know that he could find me when he wanted. I still don't understand how he followed me or what his intentions were, and I've never told Sarah about this last incident. About a year later, I took out a loan and moved me and Sarah. We were engaged at that point, to another part of the country, and my parents followed soon after. Over the years, I've pondered what he was going to do, where he wanted to lead me, what the noises were, and how he had found me when he must have stopped to clean up the spot in the woods, but most of all, why he even picked me up that night. I suppose I should be happy it was me and not some other poor victim who might not have reacted as I did, but just in case, crazy cabbie, let's not meet. This happened some years back when I was in my last year of schooling. I was on a bus on the way to school when I happened to look up and met eyes with this guy. It happened by chance, so I quickly averted my eyes and disembarked the bus. From then on, I would have frequent chance encounters with him. My course happened to be on the same floor as another course, but on different sections of the building with the elevators in the middle. I would see him everywhere, in the corridors, at the elevator, etc. It weirded me out because he would attempt to say hi and smile at me. I didn't know him and have never seen him ever, so I would ignore him. Turns out he was studying at the course opposite mine. I chalked it up to coincidence, but still felt extremely uncomfortable. Told my friends about it, and they told me that the guy had some extremely disturbing violent tendencies, and had maybe even stalked other female students. Understandably, I freaked the heck out. The climax came one morning when I went to my classroom, which was really a project room for the final year students. I arrived late as always and went about setting up my station. The room is supposed to be locked and only accessible by a key card, but we keep the door propped open. All the desks are shielded with tall partitions in. Mine was shielded from the windows. Suddenly, the weird guy came into my classroom and went towards my table. He didn't even belong in this section of the building. Also, how did he know exactly where I sat if my desk was shielded from view? He saw me and I saw him, and I hurriedly attempted to feign sleep in hopes of chasing him away. He approached my table with a shoebox in his hands and asked why I was on the table and if I wasn't feeling well. My friend awkwardly told him that we were working. My friends were in a corner watching a variety show and laughing, obviously not working. He said he had something to give me. I stayed silent and continued pretending to be asleep. This lasted until he awkwardly went away. Later on, as I related this to my friends from the other course, they told me that he was extremely protective about the box and was extremely threatening to people in his class. Went something along the lines of, "If you look, I'll kill you." Problem was, nobody expressed interest in the box and the threat was unprovoked, so they got curious and peeked into the box to find that it contained dead flowers. How would he feel the need to pick dead flowers and gift them to me in a shoebox? I felt extremely unsafe and uncomfortable and insisted my friends accompany me everywhere until it felt safe enough. The strange guy also never appeared again. This happened a few months ago. The context required it. At this point in time, I had just picked my mental health back up after an extremely traumatic non-consensual episode. You can guess what. And was still struggling with chronic inability to say no to people. I'm a 21-year-old gay trans man, and while I never had trouble passing, I'm still seen as very pretty and young looking. So I was at a young people's event at my place of worship, which is completely accepting of all sorts of new people, by the way. It was a lovely evening. I met a lot of great people, got a bit tipsy and had a great time. That is, until around 12:45 to 1 a.m. when things were starting to wind up. I went upstairs and met a man, looked approximately in his late 30s, called Tobias. Tobias was quite forward, complimenting my appearance, being familiar, asking about my sexuality, so I guessed that he was interested, but I didn't feel the same way. My place of worship has always been a safe place for me, so I assumed if I didn't flirt back, he would get the message. Shortly after, I went downstairs to put something in the bin and he followed me. When we were alone, he kissed me. I pulled away and told him, "Sorry, I'm not available." He said, "Don't worry, neither am I," and gestured to his wedding ring. I laughed it off, turned, and walked back upstairs. And as we walked, Tobias told me, "I can't believe I just did that. Nothing happened. That didn't just happen." I nodded and thought that was that. The evening was getting late. I decided to get home. I offered to walk a friend of mine to the station, and when she left to go to the bathroom, he asked where I was going. I said firmly, "I'm going to walk my friend to the station, and then I'm going home." She returned, and as we left, he decided to come along with us. I asked where he was headed. He said, "Oh, I'll go to the station for you." I reiterated that I was going straight home from that point. Along the way, my friend wanted to get another drink and hang out, and I agreed. We were chatting and all seemed friendly, but I was becoming increasingly uncomfortable with Tobias's behavior. He was constantly complimenting me, telling me I was amazing, special, and not like anyone he'd ever met. And even kept touching me, putting his hands on my neck and down the back of my skirt, still trying to kiss me. FYI, this is a tactic called love bombing, I think, and it is a big ol' red flag. He commented on some hickeys I had. Who was that? Whoever it was. You think they're better than me? Really better than me? You let a boy do that to you? I told him that it was someone I had known for a long time and reminded him that I wasn't single. He had kissed me around 4 times up to this point, and when he did, I would pull away, try and put distance between us, move my head so he wouldn't, laugh awkwardly, and say, "We are in a shop. Please don't. I'm not what you're looking for. You don't know me," etc. This man straight up tried to make out with me 1 meter away from some poor shopkeeper serving us. Squeezed my waist and commented on how skinny and small I was. Asked me how old I was and commented, "Wow, you look so young." He asked me if I was attracted to him and I shrugged, shook my head and said, "Sorry, I'm very into the person I'm with and I can't even look at anyone else when I have someone." At this point, I should have told him to screw off. In fact, I should have said that a long time before this. But when it's actually happening, it's surprisingly difficult to get a bearing on when you can start being rude. Which is exactly what people who behave like this rely on. A vulnerable person's fear of making a scene. Or else they actually believe that this behavior means the person wants to be persuaded. We all decided to sit on a bench as all the pubs were shut. Sat on the end and my friend was next to me. Tobias whined that I wasn't sitting next to him. My friend asked why that mattered and he said, "Oh, you know, because I want him to." Never mind, I'm being too much. I'm going too far. I tried to steer the conversation away from him flirting, but he kept standing and walking to where I was sitting to kiss me, crouching by me and putting his hands on my knees. He didn't want to tell us how old he was because he was afraid I wouldn't like him, but did eventually confess he was 37. In an attempt to stop him being interested in me, I revealed that I was transgender and he put his hands up my shirt saying, "Wow, you really think I would judge you for that? You have no idea who I am. I see you." Side note, what is this, the Avatar? I would never care. I would still do everything with you. He meant sexually, by the way. I wiggled away as far as I was able and said something along the lines of, "Well, thank you, but I'm not interested." My friend had somehow misread the situation as me enjoying this behavior, probably because I'm a bloke. I texted another friend to call me so that I could get 5 minutes away from the situation, walked up the street, explained everything and made a plan, which was a really good idea, talking out loud about it. I finally registered that this wasn't right, that I was totally in the right to be uncomfortable and wanted to get the heck out. I returned and told everyone that I was going home. The second I came back, he tried to kiss me and told me he was worried and had tried to come looking for me. I moved my head so he couldn't and told him, "Please don't, I'm going home." I texted the friend I was with help, and she immediately started saying that we were going home. He should go home too, and she and I were leaving together now. He asked me, "What's changed? You've come back different. Who are you talking to? What's going on?" I told him, "I'm uncomfortable and I'm going home now." He said, "What are you talking about? Have I made you uncomfortable?" "Yes, I'm going home now." To this point, I can definitely see that my lack of rudeness and conflict avoidance tactics had actually made the situation much worse and given him the impression that I could be persuaded to do whatever he wanted, or somehow I'd let him on. So now that I've been absolutely crystal clear, he should back off, right? "Wrong," he said. "Wow, who were you talking to? What's happened? Whoever it is, don't throw this away. I know we had a connection. You're special." Said, "I only met you this evening. You made me feel uncomfortable and you should ask before you kiss people." Wow, I can't believe this. You're trying to turn this around on me. "I know you're drunk, it's fine. I just want to go home now." "Oh, I'm completely sober. I'm not drunk." At this point, my friend stepped in and tried to assure him everything was fine and convince him to leave. He asked me for another kiss and I shook my head. "No, thank you," he said. "Don't throw this away," and tried to touch my face. I reiterated, "I met you this evening. I don't know you. I want to go home." He said, "Can I at least have a hug?" and immediately tried to hug me. Pushed him away and said, "I would rather not." He said, "Wow, you're making me feel uncomfortable now." I said I would rather not. Please respect my boundaries. I want to go home. My friend again tried to get him to go home. He said, "No, you're making me feel like I've done something wrong. I just want a hug." "Oh, I know what this is. You're just not used to people accepting you for who you are. You can't handle that I accept you and see you for who you are." "I mean, really?" I said, "That's not the case. I have plenty of people who accept me, but you've made me feel uncomfortable and I'm going home." At this point, I was stood up, backed against the edge of the bench with him standing barely a foot away. I had started shaking because I was feeling anxious, so I just walked away up the street. My friend stayed with him, convincing him to go home. He didn't follow us. I took her to the station and got myself into an Uber. The next day, I handed a report very similar to this to the security at my place of worship, and the dude was promptly barred from entry. I hope people can see the mechanisms of how this situation was set up and can find confidence to be more outspoken than I was, because by being polite, I made the situation worse. I know it's not my fault, but I'm very grateful that I'm not timid like I used to be, and now I'm able to absolutely be firm, and if need be, rude about setting my boundary. Therapy is a hell of a drug, and it's doing me wonders. This story happened to me around 6 months ago. I've lived where I lived for 3 years. It's a nice apartment in an amazing location, but they were built in the late 90s. The last few years, the city I live in has had a massive population boom and people have been non-stop pouring in. Good weather, amazing economy, and cool place to do stuff always. Because of this, I have seen the landlord staff start to do heavy maintenance on the apartments to bring them up to date to attract more people to them. My neighbor lived in his apartment for something like 6 years before he ended up buying a house and moved. When he moved, the landlord immediately started redoing his apartment as one to bring up to date. The way that the apartment layout is, there are 2 stories. Where my bedroom is, on the direct other side of the bedroom wall, is the staircase in my neighbor's apartment. The way my bedroom layout is, has my bed right up against that wall. They were completely stripping this place clean. It was one of the first ones that they did such heavy remodeling to. For weeks, I would always see the workers over there painting and redoing the floors. A few days before this happened were no different. I left and saw them doing maintenance on the kitchen, and when I came home from work, they were gone for the day. Nothing unusual, not a single bit. The part that is unusual is what happened one particular night. I was awake around 1 a.m. watching TV in my room when I heard somebody on the other side of the wall slowly walking up the stairs and very obviously stopping halfway up. Where the person was stopping was directly where my head lay on the other side of the wall. I could feel him listening to me breathing. I immediately turned the TV sound off and sat there extremely quiet and still. I heard nothing for a few minutes, and then after what felt like an absolute eternity, I heard the person start walking the rest of the stairs to the second floor. My survival instinct kicked in instantly. It was very obvious that somebody was on the other side of that wall listening to me. I also knew that it was only a few days before this happened that I saw the maintenance redoing that apartment's kitchen. I knew that there was no way somebody already moved in that fast. I obviously couldn't see if there was movement in there from the window, but I had a good angle to see if anybody walked out. I sat there for about 15 minutes just staring outside to see if I saw anything at all. Nothing. I went back into my room and laid down in bed again. I didn't play the TV, just sat there waiting to hear something again. I was messing around on my phone for about 20 minutes in silence until I heard movement of the stairs again. This time though, the movement didn't start from the top or the bottom. The movement started in the middle of the staircase, meaning that the entire time I was sitting there in silence, this person was just on the other side of the wall listening to my every move. This terrified me, so I called the police. I gave them all the information of what was going on, and they informed me somebody would be out very soon. I went back to one room and watched out the window again. Only a few moments later, a police car pulled up and a cop got out to examine the building and apartment. He was looking around and shining his light in the windows. I heard him knock on the door and, shortly after, could hear him talking to somebody but couldn't make out what they were saying. I was totally puzzled by this. The officer walked over to my door and knocked. I went downstairs and he informed me very nicely that somebody just moved in there. I laughed and was completely embarrassed. I even said to the cop that it was a heck of a way to meet your new neighbor. I felt embarrassed, but more importantly, felt very relieved about the entire situation. I brushed off the whole thing as just being late and my mind playing massive tricks on me. The next day, I went to leave my apartment when I saw something that made me stop dead in my tracks. I went outside and only took a few steps towards my car when I saw maintenance over there carrying out the old refrigerator. I was puzzled. I walked over to the apartment and I looked in the door that was wide open. The kitchen was still being worked on and not a single piece of furniture could be seen. I was legitimately speechless. I walked over to a maintenance man and said, "Didn't somebody move in here?" And he informed me no, and that the apartment wouldn't be ready for showings until at least 3 weeks. I ran back upstairs into my apartment and called my landlord. I asked her if somebody was staying there and she said absolutely not. I told her about what I experienced the night before and she was floored. She told me that they would change that apartment's locks immediately. She also suggested that I call the non-emergency line to the police department and inform them that nobody lives there. I did just that, and they asked me to come down to the station. I told them all the information in detail of what happened. They were able to quickly figure out what officer came out to check out the situation, so he could help identify the person who answered the door. The officer described the man in detail, and I confirmed that I have never seen him around the apartments before. There was a search around town for a few weeks, until the whole thing just sort of fizzled out, and I stopped hearing about it and started seeing fewer and fewer patrol cars randomly in the parking lot. After that night, I never heard anything in that apartment. Around a month later, an older couple moved in and they were very nice. When I saw the moving van pull up, I went to introduce myself to them, but to be completely honest, the only reason I went out there was to see if any of them matched the description of who the cops saw. Not even close. I'm certain that the person who was in that apartment got away with it. I had an extremely hard time sleeping the following weeks after that happened to me. I actually ended up moving my bed into the smaller second bedroom because it bothered me so much. I have zero idea what the intentions of this person were or what he was doing on that staircase, but it's easily one of the most chilling things that's ever happened to me. So, random man that's listening to me sleep, let's not meet again. start out by saying that I'm not a writer by any means. I suck at it, but I will try my best. For a bit of backstory, my mom was dating an abusive prick at this time. We'll call him Ian. Because of Ian and the crazy fights they had gotten into, we couldn't lock up my house at all. He had kicked in both the front and back door to the house, and they were never fixed. My mother and Ian were at the bar all day, every day. I told you this so you know why the house wasn't locked up and where my parents were when this happened. This incident occurred when I was around 12 years old and my little brother was around 10. I was a pretty smart girl at this age, and my brother was sick all the time, so he was very tiny and frail. My mother and Ian were at the bar as usual. When you opened my front door, it put you in the living room and you could see the back door. There was a hallway to the right that led back into the bedrooms, and that is where my brother and I were. We were in his bedroom with the door closed, playing something on the PlayStation. It was around midnight or 1 a.m., and we were playing and having a good time when I heard a weird noise. My brother didn't hear it, and I didn't want to creep him out. I told him that I wanted to get a drink and told him to stay in the room and I would bring him something. To get to my kitchen, you would have to walk down the hallway in front of both the front and back doors because it was behind the living room. Kept hearing strange noises, so before I left out of my brother's room, I told him to get into the closet and work on our fort so that it would be ready when I was done getting our drinks and a snack. I raised my little brother for the most part and took care of him. I had a terrible feeling, sense of dread. I could tell something wasn't right, and this was a way to get my brother to hide without scaring him. He frightened easily and had really bad asthma attacks, and at this time we had no inhaler or his breathing treatment machine for him. Good going, Ma. I knew if he started having an asthma attack on top of being scared, it wouldn't be pretty. Anyways, I left the back room and decided to see what was going on, because I was such a badass at 12 years old, but I had to protect my little brother. Started sneaking up the hallway as slowly and quietly as I could. I was terrified. I could feel that something was wrong. Before I made it to the end of the hallway, I heard a man. It sounded like he was growling. It was a deep, terrifying noise. Can't explain it, but the feeling that washed over me damn near made me puke. So I, of course, freeze. I have no one in this town. I don't know anyone, and my dad is living in a different state. My mom is at the bar drunk as heck. I was sitting there trying to gather the courage to see what was around the corner and going over my options when I heard my brother's door open. He sees me and the look on my face and freezes. I remember his eyes going so wide with fear because he must have heard the growl or whatever it was too. I motioned to him with my hands to go back in the room and he does. I gathered the courage to peek around the corner and what I saw still freaks me out to this day. It was horrifying. I saw a man probably around 6'6" and 300 pounds, sitting on my couch with a wicked grin on his face. That grin and the look in his eyes will forever be burned into my head. By some stupid luck, the man didn't see me. I so slowly snuck back to my brother's room. I slowly shut the door and started going over my options. My little brother was already, of course, horrified because of the growling noise this man was making. I'm so thankful that he wasn't the one who saw what was out there. I mustered my brave big sister face and calmly told him that there was a man that I didn't know on the couch and he needed to be very quiet and I needed him to be brave and keep his breathing in check. My little brother adored me and looked up to me, so when I told him that I needed him to be brave, he tried his best. I told him not to move and he didn't. The first thing I tried was the window, but it wouldn't budge. It was completely stuck. I'm making myself stay calm for my brother's sake, but I know what's sitting out there. So since the window was stuck, I decided to start looking for a weapon. My older brother lived here and I know he had swords somewhere. I don't remember where he was. As I'm looking for a weapon, I hear the man sing, "I know you're here." Man, my stomach knotted up. The hair on the back of my neck rose and I instantly got a cold sweat. And then I hear it. My little brother had started wheezing. Asthma attack. I hugged him, reminded him about being brave, and told him to sit still and focus on his breathing. I started frantically trying to get my window open, but it was stuck. I looked around and started moving blankets when I found my older brother's cell phone that he always forgot. I remember thinking that I was lucky and felt a bit of relief. I immediately called the police and told them what was happening, hysterical at this point but still remaining quiet. The dispatcher told me to remain on the phone so she could hear what was happening when the man started banging on her bedroom door. It had been about 5 minutes into the phone call when this happened, and I could no longer remain calm. I lost it. I started screaming. I mean, like a blood-curdling scream. The kind that would send chills down your spine if you heard it. I forgot to mention that our bedroom had the only working lock, so the door was locked. He was trying to get in and banging on the door. His banging got louder and louder. He was screaming to let him in when it went completely silent. Then he did the creepiest, most terrifying thing ever. He started laughing. You know, I could just bust down this door in about 2 seconds, right, little girl? Tap, tap, tap. Now he's lightly knocking on the door and asking for me to open it. His demeanor completely changed. I then heard a scraping at the door. What I had imagined it was in my 12-year-old head was he was scraping the door with his really long fingernails or something. But that wasn't the case. Then I hear the police start screaming at him to get on the ground, put his hands up, etc. I heard him putting up a fight, followed by more yelling and eventually silence. After a few minutes, there was a knock on my door, but at this point I was too terrified to open it. I thought that this nightmare guy was still there, so being in my hysterical state, I started screaming, "No, no, no, please," over and over again. I couldn't stay brave for my little brother anymore. I was on the floor holding him this whole time, convinced that we were going to die. Eventually, I calmed myself a bit, and this time a female officer was at the door, so I opened it. There were about 5 cops standing in the hallway listening to me being hysterical. I refused to let go of my brother at this point, but we both ran to this female officer and just collapsed. We had been so scared. It turns out this guy was completely wasted and high on drugs. I remember the cops walking me up to him and having me stand in front of him to ask me if I knew this man. I didn't, but I'll never forget standing in front of this huge man, looking into his brown eyes that were completely bloodshot and filled with hatred. I'll never forget that growling noise that he was making, or the look of pure horror in my little brother's eyes. My parents were called and investigated for leaving us alone like that and for the doors being like that. My mom is a different person now. She doesn't drink and is now married to a cop. She has completely changed. I remember asking her about it later on, and she told me something that I didn't know. The man had a huge knife, so that's what he was scraping the door with. And he also had some rope, tape, and a tarp. I still don't know how he didn't get to us, or why he didn't just bust down the door to get us. It would have taken one half-ass kick from him to kick down the door. It was super thin. It creeps me out still, and I have had nightmares from it. My husband doesn't understand why I get so furious with him when he leaves the door unlocked at night. I work 3rd shift, so I'll come home and the door will be unlocked. It's infuriating because I then have to go through every room in the house and check the closets and the other places that a person could hide. I have 2 kids and they will never ever go through what I did. Sorry for my shitty writing style, but I wanted to tell my story after lurking here for so long. Back in my younger days, when I was still living with roommates, I had what turned out to be the most obvious of dangerous encounters. I was looking to move and I was about to leave to see a place in the perfect location with a good price, and 2 seemingly professional male roomies. At the last minute, my boyfriend suggested that he goes along because the place is nearby and they'll have to meet him at some point anyways. We get there and I introduce myself, and the one roommate seems a little taken aback at the fact that I had somebody with me. I suppose it could be seen as unusual to bring your boyfriend, but I figured, oh well, the damage has already been done. If they don't allow me to be their roommate simply because he's with me, I can't do anything about it now. Let's just see the place. The apartment is huge. We're both suitably impressed until we turn the corner of the living room and we see it. The 2 cameras set up with a light pointed at the couch. There's a guy sitting on the couch who is introduced as the other roommate. He jumps off of the couch and gives my boyfriend the same weird look. I now realize the look they were giving was disappointment. I shoot my boyfriend a very quick look of understanding, but we silently decide to continue with the tour so as to not escalate the situation. I casually joke that it's nice to have a camera so I can videotape myself for my auditions. They both laugh much too hard and say, "Yeah, that's what we were doing." He brings us over to my room, and it's literally a broom closet. You wouldn't even be able to fit a single-sized bed in there. It's now patently obvious that there was never a room for rent in the first place. I take this opportunity to get out there by saying, "Oh, that's too bad. I have a queen bed and I won't be able to fit." "Okay, well, thanks for your time." We get out to the street and walk around the corner without saying a word. When we finally look at each other, it's in this stunned silence. He just hugged me really tight and we went for a walk in the park.